Chapter 407. Scorching Flames. In the depths of the underground ruins, which should have been pitch black, flames had been ignited near the passageway. The torches that had been there for an unknown period of time, as well as the lamps that were filled with oil, were all ignited automatically under some kind of power. It was said that the land where the Baler walked would burn. Although there were very few people who had seen this terrifying monster, legends about it were still circulating in the mortal world. Because in the stories of mortals, the Baler was close to the most powerful enemy. The challenge level was equivalent to an old red dragon, and most of the dragons that appeared in the stories of mortals were young and adult dragons. If one went higher, then one would basically need to challenge the existence of the deities. The abyss was a place of chaos and evil. There were many types of demons and new types were born almost every day. But there was no doubt that the true master of the abyss was the Tanar'ri demons, which were the current third-generation abyss demons. Before them, the ruler of the abyss was the Orbis demons, the descendants of chaos and destruction. They were the creations of the first batch of chaos demons and once ruled the abyss for a long time. But then humans were born. Before the current order had truly taken shape, the souls of dead humans began to enter the bottomless abyss. The Orbis demons were very interested in the souls of these mortals. They used their own chaotic power to transform these souls and finally created the Tanar'ri demons of today. The demons created by fusing human souls were abnormally powerful and numerous. In the end, the chaotic war in the abyss broke out. The Tanar'ri demons overthrew the second-generation demon lord and became the ruler of the abyss. Now, even the many demon lords in the abyss were also born as Tanar'ri demons. They had the spiritual power of humans. The Baler was the best among the Tanar'ri demons and also a high-level demon that inherited the power of chaos and flame. Even in the abyss, the Baler demons were the absolute ruling class. They stood at the top of the demon race, second only to the demon lord. They were one of the few high-level demons born with divinity and had always been the main force on the abyss battlefield. A Baler demon was the demon lord in any place in the abyss and controlled a large number of demon armies. Note, to challenge the Baler demons in the abyss, one must face the demon army. Name, Baler, high-level demon, large otherworld creature. Race, Tanar'ri demon. Attributes, Strength 35, Agility 25, Constitution 31, Intelligence 21, Wisdom 24, Charm 26. Alignment, Chaotic Evil Creature level, 25 plus Challenge level, 20 plus HP, 360 plus Godhood. None Divinity, Lesser Divinity Domain, Flame, Chaos, Evil. Treasures, Standard Coins, Double Treasures, plus 3 Abyssal Beheading Sword, plus 3 Abyssal Flame Whip. Basic Skills, Deception 310, Focus 330, Negotiation 350, Disguise 100, Hide 260, Intimidation 330, Knowledge 300, Listen 380, Sneak 300, Search 300, Discerning 300, Spellcraft 300, Detect 380, Survival 70, Use Magic Device 310. Special Skills, Burning Explosion, Bind, Spell-like Ability, Summon Demons. Specialty Abilities, Cleave, Powerful Cleave, Proficient in First Strike, Proficient in Dual Wielding, Fierce Attack, Advanced Fierce Attack, Instant Cast Spell-like Ability, Telekinesis, Advanced Dual Wielding, Longsword, Expert, Beheading Sword, Master. Spell-like Abilities, Blasphemy, Dominate Monster, Advanced Dispel Magic, Advanced Teleportation, Soul Assimilation, Decree. Intimidate, Telekinesis, Evil Spirit Light, Firestorm, Internal Explosion. Innate Ability, Flaming Body. The Baler. It was a textbook monster in the abyss. Almost any adventurer who was ready to go to the abyss would remember the basic information of the Baler. When Soren felt the surrounding temperature rise, a large amount of data had already appeared in his mind. When he first went to the abyss, the Baler was one of the monsters he paid attention to. Because if he encountered this monster, he had to know enough about it to defeat it. It was too strong. Challenging the Baler was not much easier than challenging a demigod. The thirst for slaughter continued. Soren's mind did not disappear because of his transformation, but there was an extra desire to fight and kill. The Baler was the only enemy here that could satisfy his desire to kill. Flames. A huge shadow. When Soren went through the dark tunnel, the light in front of him suddenly became abundant. In front of him stood a huge monster that was burning with raging flames. It had a pair of demonic horns and a pair of wide demonic wings on its back. However, it was basically useless in this narrow underground ruin. The Baler was more than 12 feet tall and weighed more than 5,000 pounds. In its hand was a huge abyssal beheading sword that was burning with raging flames. The Baler was also a high-level demon that mastered dual wielding. Its other weapon was the level +3 Abyssal Flame Whip. The temperature was gradually rising. The Baler was like a huge flame, and any creature that approached it would be incessantly burned. However, just when this huge monster appeared in front of Soren, a strange silver light appeared on the legendary curved sword Icing Death. It was as dazzling as the stars, isolating the scorching flames. At the same time, it automatically extinguished the magic flames caused by the Baler in a burst of magic aura. This legendary curved sword had killed the Baler before. After sensing the evil aura and discovering a new enemy, it even trembled slightly in Soren's hand. The flames became a little weaker. The raging flames on the Baler seemed to have dimmed a lot. Then a pair of heavy shackles appeared in Soren's sight. The shackles with a silver-white metallic luster bound its hands, and there seemed to be a barb piercing through its huge demon wings. It had been sealed here for a long time. Even after thousands of years, it still couldn't break free from the seal here because it was imprisoned by the great arcanists of the Arcane Empire. Demon? No. A human? The pupils of the Baler were like jumping flames. It stared at Soren, who appeared in front of it, and said in the ancient demon language, "A human with the aura of a slaughterer. Mortal. Come here, release me. I will give you everything you want." Soren sneered. He didn't care about the Baler's words at all because demons were untrustworthy. They didn't abide by the law of contract at all. Anyone who made a deal with a demon could be eaten by them in the end. Besides, Soren's purpose was to take its life. An arrow on the bow. Soren took out the elven war bow and directly shot an arrow at the Baler in front of him. Clang. The Baler's huge beheading sword instantly blocked the arrow. At the same time, the wooden shaft of the arrow instantly burned, and even the steel arrowhead showed signs of melting. The terrible strength of a superior demon was undoubtedly revealed in an instant. Unless it was a legendary existence, it couldn't even get close to it because the body of the Baler was scorching hot. Note, any enemy caught by the Baler will receive 36 fire damage per second. The power of the seal was still there. The furious Baler let out a roar. It took a step forward, and in an instant the shackles shackling it appeared with a faint magic aura. Then it groaned. The chain was connected to the wall behind it, and there was a huge 9-pointed star array on it. There were slight traces of cracks on the surface of the array, and there were wreckage after the battle nearby. These were left behind by adventurers who had explored this place before. The mark of the Baler on the map was also left behind by them. Damned mortal. The Baler let out a roar. The shackles that bound its hands couldn't stop it from attacking Soren. The Baler fiercely waved its flame whip and flew towards Soren in front of it. A flame that was more than 10 meters long. The flame whip came with a whistling sound. It was as flexible as a poisonous snake and blocked all of Soren's escape routes. What? Soren's eyes narrowed. His figure rose into the air, and he didn't have any intention to dodge. Instead, he directly slashed at the flame whip. A silver stream of light appeared. The flame on the flame whip seemed to dim and then gradually extinguished. Then the Baler shook its hand and took it back. It stared at the curved sword in Soren's hand. The flame in its eyes jumped, and it said in a deep voice, "This weapon has a disgusting aura." The first round of confrontation. It seemed that both sides were probing attacks. Although Soren saw the shackles on the Baler with his own eyes, he didn't have the slightest idea of attacking rashly. The sealed flame Baler was still a flame Baler. No matter how it was trapped in this underground ruin, its challenge rating of more than 21 would not lie. Soren had encountered this kind of sealed high-level demon more than once. Although they were trapped somewhere, it didn't mean that they had no fighting power. For example, even if Soren had no weapon, even if his hands were shackled, his powerful attributes and abilities could still turn him into a terrible killing machine in an instant. The seal here had been loosened. There were 2 broken pillars behind the Baler. Originally, the shackles on its hands should have been wrapped around it, but now only the barbs on its back were connected to the wall. This allowed it to have some mobility. Soren's mind was working quickly, thinking about ways to kill the Baler in front of him, and also calculating its danger. Oh. The flame whip once again turned into a flame. The chaotic nature of the Baler made it so easy to be provoked. It shook the flame whip and wrapped it around Soren as if it was going to catch him to its side. But Soren jumped away again. The Baler that was chained in place had a limited attack range, so the danger to him was reduced a lot. But just as Soren jumped away from the attack, a grin appeared on the Baler's face and it growled, "Mortal! You can't escape." Spirit summon. The evil magic aura emerged. The Baler raised its hand and pointed at Soren, and it launched its spell-like ability. Soren's body was hit in an instant. Immediately, a row of data appeared in front of his eyes. You've been attacked by the Baylor's spirit summon. Slaughterer form activated. Divine power transformed. You're immune to this spell effect. Soren landed safely. The Baylor's expression seemed to be a little unbelievable. It roared and waved the flame whip again, and at the same time, launched another spell ability toward Soren. Law, intimidate. The flame whip whistled past, and the evil magic aura fell on Soren again. But this time, Soren didn't even plan to dodge. He directly resisted the spell of the Baylor, and at the same time, waved his curved sword to cut the flame whip. A data prompt appeared. You've been attacked by the Baylors. Law, intimidate. Slaughterer form activated. Divine power transformed. Your HP is higher than 200. Toughness passed. You're completely immune to the effect of this spell. Soren's mouth showed a sarcastic smile. He dared to come here to challenge the high-grade legendary Baylor because he was basically immune to the opponent's control ability when he transformed into a slaughterer. Spells like Law, Intimidate, were very likely to be ineffective against Soren, who had a strong HP. Few of the Baylor's control spells could work on him. As if it was unbelievable, the Baylor suddenly cast several spells toward Soren. Mind Control. Immune. Evil Aura. Immune. Blasphemy. The angry Baylor uttered ancient blasphemy. This evil language seemed to have some kind of powerful magic. When it spoke this depraved language, the air around was filled with evil energy. This time, Soren was no longer unmoved. His expression changed a little. It seemed that he was in pain and crazy. His body trembled involuntarily as if he was suffering great pain. The Baylor couldn't help but laugh. The arrogant enemy in front of it finally fell under its spell, and the blasphemy had an effect on him. Ah! Soren let out a painful howl, and then he stood up trembling. There was a strange blood-red light in his pupils, and the violent atmosphere on his body became stronger. He opened his mouth gently and said a blasphemy that was also full of evil. Blasphemy. A dense data display appeared in front of Soren's eyes in an instant. Chapter 408. Rewind time to 1 second ago. When the Baylor uttered the blasphemous words, Soren's brain also seemed to be struck by lightning in an instant. A burning breath emerged from his body and flowed all over his body in an instant. Not only that, but Soren's powerful memory ability also seemed to be activated by some kind of power, and he instantly remembered these blasphemous words that he could not understand at all. This was the power of the oldest evil god and one of the abilities that the gods of the evil alignment were good at. Pain. Soren's brain seemed to be pierced by some kind of power, and he instantly understood the ancient blasphemous words. Blasphemous words, pain. This power seemed to be so compatible with him at this moment, and Soren actually mastered it in an instant. A series of data appeared. You are affected by the effect of blasphemous words. Divinity of Slaughter transformation. Divinity of Fear transformation. Slaughterer form activated. Eidetic memory triggered. Encyclopedic knowledge triggered. Your alignment is lawful evil. Divinity level is minor divinity. You are immune to this blasphemous damage. The compatibility between your level of evil and blasphemous words is 91%. Divinity mastery ability activated. You have learned a new ability, blasphemous words. Blasphemous words. As the name suggested, it was a special power of the evil alignment. This was the oldest blasphemous words. Only some powerful and evil beings with divinity could master this ability. Otherwise, they could only master the lower level of blasphemous words, which was the special spellcasting ability used by the blasphemous priests in Whiterun. Some priests who were favored by the gods also had this ability, but they mastered Word of Truth. If they could become the chosen or favored by the gods, this ability could be upgraded to Holy Word. Good and evil. The abilities mastered by these two camps were different, but the most fundamental power of evil was still blasphemy. Under normal circumstances, even if Soren wanted to master blasphemous words, he had to go through an evil sacrificial ritual, and perform a depraved blasphemous ritual during the sacrificial ritual. The ritual process was different according to the god sacrificed. If it was a demon, then it was likely to be a bloody ritual. If it was a devil, then it might be some terrible conspiracy. Of course, there were many choices for this ritual sacrifice because the evil gods of the Abyss and Bator Inferno could also give this ability. For example, the Queen of Succubus, the easiest sacrificial ritual to please her. Because she was the demon god in charge of lust, depravity, and ethics, it was easy to please her with certain taboo pleasurable rituals and obtain her rewards. The blasphemous abilities bestowed by demons, devils, and evil gods all came with a price. Although it could strengthen one's own power, it was also equivalent to falling into their control. Soren's mutation at this moment was different from all the blasphemy rituals. He automatically mastered and understood the blasphemy language. Just this point, even he couldn't understand it. He could only vaguely guess that it was related to his camp, the bloodline of the slaughterer, or the weak divinity, because having divinity was equivalent to stepping into the realm of the gods. If the Baler in front of him didn't have a master, then the blasphemous words it mastered was also because of its own divinity. The Baler's body was trembling. Even if it had a powerful flame body, it still suffered a lot of damage under the power of the blasphemous words. Blasphemous words, pain, special ability. Speak the most ancient blasphemous words and turn this blasphemous language into the power of pain on the enemy. Any non-territorial power can't be immune to this damage. True damage is equal to your own profession level plus divinity value. This ability can be used once a day. Soren stood up expressionlessly. The power of pain gradually subsided. He stared at the Baler in front of him, and there was a strange blood-red light in his eyes. At this moment he looked full of evil and depraved as if he was some kind of demon from the abyss. The Baler in front of him seemed to think of something. Suddenly, its face changed and said in a deep voice, "Son of Slaughter? No, no. You're too weak. It seems that I've met the descendant of the Son of Slaughter." There was a trace of greed in the Baler's eyes. It suddenly roared and stepped forward. The barbs that pierced its back were instantly pulled taut, and then drops of demon blood slid down the chain. The Baler let out a painful howl, but it still didn't retreat. Instead, it clenched the abyss beheading sword in its hand and took another step forward. The sound of flesh being torn apart was heard. The flames on its body were much weaker. The huge demon wings were torn apart by the chains, and a rather hideous wound was exposed on its back. Divinity of Slaughter. There was a trace of fanaticism in the Baler's eyes and it roared, "Ha! I actually met the descendant of the Son of Slaughter. Mortal. Let's have a showdown. The winner has everything. The loser will become a sacrifice. The one standing in front of you is the descendant of flame and destruction. High Demon Belother Kendi." As long as it was still imprisoned, it would be difficult for the Baler to really kill Soren. Because even if it couldn't kill the Baler in front of it, Soren could escape at any time, and the Baler was confined to a certain area by the chains. The Baler didn't know that Soren in front of it had a thirst for slaughter. If this thirst for slaughter was not satisfied, it would fall into madness. It just felt the divinity of slaughter in Soren's body. This power activated its crazy nature, so in order to kill Soren in front of it, it was ready to break free from the chains. Slaughter and destruction. The two most powerful divinity in the abyss. Although they were not the gods who controlled these two divinity, these two powers still created a level 27 Baler, and Soren, who was now above the ordinary legends. Boom. A trace of cracks appeared on the wall where the chains were connected, and a tearing wound appeared on the Baler's body. Its hands were still shackled, but the chains that imprisoned it in place were pulled out little by little. There was a sharp barb on its back, almost piercing through its shoulder blade. There were strange silver runes on it, and this was the power that kept it in place, unable to leave. But now it was forcibly breaking free, and with a gush of demon blood gushing out, the Baler roared in pain and madness, and once again took a step forward. Its injuries were getting worse, but the power of the seal was getting weaker and weaker. Greed and madness appeared in the Baler's eyes. As long as it could kill the mortal in front of it and take the divinity of slaughter, then the price it had to pay now was nothing. As a powerful high demon, it was confident that even if it was heavily injured, it could still kill the mortal in front of it. Baler, Belother Kendi, monster level 27, heavily injured, seal weakened, grade 6. Soren, slaughter form, class level 18, grade 4. Chapter 409. Drops of demon blood dripped on the silver chain. It seemed to contain some kind of powerful magic. After the demon blood touched the silver chain, it burned like gasoline. The Baler stared at Soren with a crazy expression and took another step forward. Then a stream of demon blood gushed out from its wound. It was like adding oil to the fire, making the raging fire spread all over the silver chain. The light on the chain was gradually dimming. It seemed that the demon blood eroded its power and the ancient runes on it. Soren, who was about to make a move, stopped. He stood in place and looked at the Baylor, who was walking forward step by step with a ferocious expression. Demon blood. The origin power of high-rank Abyss Devils was a bloodline ability they were born with. This kind of power was quite precious. In the Abyss, only after the other demons under their command had made considerable contributions, the higher demons would give them this kind of power to promote the weaker demons. This kind of promotion would reduce the power of the higher demons, so it was also an ability that was rarely used by the higher demons. Most of the time, the lower demons needed to rely on killing to promote bit by bit, from the weakest stretch to the intermediate demons. Although demons had bodies, they were still soul creations in essence. Their souls had transformed into corporeal entities. Therefore their growth had a mutation type. The power that the Baylor used at this moment was the demon blood. This blood was not only its vitality, but also part of its own strength. It used this as a price to break the seal on the chain. In short, if it was Soren who was trapped now, then not only would his HP be reduced at this moment, but also the slaughter EXP he had gained in the past battles. This kind of loss of power was permanent. The lost HP could be gradually recovered, but the lost slaughter EXP needed to be regained. The Baylor was breaking the seal in this way. The price it paid was that its power would be reduced, and it might even directly drop a grade. The Baylor was willing to pay such a price, which meant that Soren's value was amazing in its eyes. After confirming that the Baylor was using the demon blood to corrode the chain, Soren was not in a hurry to launch an attack. Although the Baylor was now trapped in the chain, its combat power was not affected much. As long as Soren was within 15 meters of it, the Baylor could launch a fierce attack at any time, and even turn the nearby area into a sea of fire. Soren waited silently, waiting for the moment when the Baylor broke the seal. When the seal was completely lifted, the Baylor's strength would be reduced to the limit. At that time his chances of winning would be higher than now. Both sides wanted to kill each other. In the eyes of the Baylor, Soren had an incomparably delicious divine power. In Soren's eyes, killing the Baylor that also had minor divinity. The slaughter form limited Soren's spellcasting ability. This was a bit disadvantageous for him because the slaughter form was similar to the Tansen's polymorph. Although it changed his combat power to that of a warrior of the same level, it also made him unable to cast spells. Soren could only use the abilities brought by divine power, as well as the spell-like abilities of his own talent. Note: spellcasting requires concentration and a clear mind. The thirst for slaughter greatly affects spellcasting ability. However, Soren's chances of winning were not low. Otherwise he would not just stand there and wait. He had challenged the Baylor in the bottomless abyss, so he was very clear about the fighting style of this powerful monster. The narrow terrain here limited its ability to fly, and it also limited the fighting skills of large weapons. Without enough space, the power of the Baylor's 2-meter-long abyssal beheading sword was greatly reduced. Soren would not fight a battle that he was not confident in. Only when his chances of winning were more than 50% would he take the risk. Boom. The Baylor roared and took another step forward. At this moment, the silver chain on its back was stretched to the limit, and the silver runes on it became very dim. The true demon blood turned into a raging fire and melted it little by little. The source of the Baylor's power was fire. Its true demon blood was the hottest fire in the bottomless abyss. Even the seal left behind by the Arcane Empire could not resist this powerful force. Crack. When the Baylor's huge body of more than 5,000 pounds took another step forward, the already fragile chain directly broke. It roared and suddenly raised the abyssal beheading sword and rushed towards Soren in front of it. Although the moment when the seal was broken was the moment when it was the weakest, it was also the moment when the Baylor's aura was the strongest. After breaking the seal at a heavy cost, the Baylor's crazy expression showed an indomitable will to fight. This strong will to fight was matched with its huge body and the 35 points of strength that it was born with. It was enough to cause crushing damage to any enemy. It was even confident that it could kill the weak mortal in front of it with one hit. 35 points of strength. This was a terrible power that mortals could never reach. Its strength was not only because of its own spell-like abilities, but also because of the powerful attributes brought by the high demon blood. Rumble. The Baylor rushed over like the bravest warrior. It swung the 2-meter-long abyssal beheading sword with one hand as if it was weightless. At the same time, the flame whip swept from the side and directly blocked all the space that Soren could dodge. No matter which angle he dodged from, Soren could only choose one of the abyssal beheading sword and the flame whip. Never underestimate any high demon. The Baylor's body looked fat and heavy, but it actually had as high as 25 points of agility. Note: adult dragons only have 10 points. and it also had the skill of greater dual wielding. Regardless of any spell-like abilities, just relying on its own attributes, talents, abilities and fighting skills, the Baylor was enough to easily crush a legendary Orthodox warrior. Unless there was a cheat-like existence that could kill it with one slash, even the incarnation of the gods would have to pay a little price to deal with the Baylor. Mighty slam. A burning flame appeared on the Baylor's abyssal beheading sword, like a huge burning torch. The sharp edge of the sword was hidden in the fire, and it directly slashed toward Soren's head. The flame whip came from the side at a tricky angle. It was clearly an attack from two different directions, but it was so easy to use it. Shadow leap. Shadow strike. A strange blood-red light appeared in Soren's eyes. In the face of the Baylor's attack, his figure disappeared in an instant. He had been standing in the shadow. The next moment, Soren's figure appeared in the shadow behind the Baylor. He only jumped less than 6 meters away, then pulled out his curved sword and stabbed into the back of the Baylor. The fiercer the attack, the harder it was to take it back. The Baylor's attack that had accumulated to the limit hit the open space. The abyssal beheading sword directly split the ground with a loud bang, leaving a terrible gully in the place. A piercing pain came from behind it. The Baylor let out a crazy roar, and the flame whip in its hand instantly hit its back. The whip was a very flexible weapon, and the abyssal beheading sword was a very overbearing weapon. These two weapons were extremely difficult to master. Only the Baylor could use them so well. Sword form, heavy hack. In the face of the flame whip coming from the side, Soren's expression did not change at all. The hot flame enveloped him. This was the fire of the Baylor. Ordinary people could not even get close to this terrible monster. However, Soren was not afraid of the flame, because the curved sword was emitting a strange silver light. No flame could get close to his body. Even the nearby magic flames were extinguished by this legendary weapon. Time froze at that moment. The flame whip swept over with a roar. Soren suddenly rolled sideways and dodged the Baylor's crotch. The opponent was 12 feet tall and weighed more than 5,000 pounds. It was too big for Soren. He had enough space to use the swordsmanship from the Underdark. With a cold and ruthless light, Soren directly launched the sword form, heavy hack, under the Baylor's crotch. Wuxia. A gush of blood spewed out. Then, like an unstoppable fountain, Soren cut a 30-centimeter-long wound in the Baylor's groin amid its painful and mournful screams. Its huge body gave it terrible power. However, this size also gave Soren enough space to perform. At this moment of life and death, he did not care about any face or demeanor. No matter how bad the skill was, Soren would not hesitate to use it. Damned mortals. The immense pain made the Baylor's body tremble. No male creature would be able to continue fighting as if nothing had happened after being cut in the groin. Soren's cold eyes did not change at all. When he rolled under the Baylor's crotch to dodge, he also appeared at the lower corner of the opponent, which was also the attack range of the Abyss beheading sword. The Baylor, who was proficient in dual wielding, shook the flame whip and instantly retracted it. At the same time, it waved the huge Abyss beheading sword and slashed at Soren. It wanted to cut the damn mortal in front of it in half. Its 35 points of strength gave it enough confidence to crush the enemy in front of it with one sword. Swing sword form. Soren slammed his palm on the ground. The huge force made a clear palm print on the ground. The reaction force from the ground made Soren's body fly half a meter in an instant. Then the curved sword icing Death's body bent about 30 degrees when it touched the hard rock. The second reaction force took effect on Soren's body. He rotated at a 360 degrees angle and moved about a meter away. The next moment, the heavy Abyss beheading sword swung down and cut a crack more than 2 meters deep on the ground. Soren, who almost dodged the sword edge, did not hesitate and slammed his palm on the ground again. The huge force made his whole body fly back and directly move a distance of nearly 5 meters. As the top legendary rogue in the past, his fighting skills were not just limited to the sword form. Although he didn't have Shadow Realm or Shadow Step, and he couldn't use the unpredictable surprise attack ability, his strong enough attributes had allowed him to use many extraordinary combat skills. No rogue could casually stand at the top. Soren used to challenge a saint as a legend. Fighting with only the abilities of a rogue was undoubtedly courting death. Sword form, horizontal slash. Shadow strike. The fighting skills from the east required the support of Ki. The monk's wind walk, non-stealth ability, traceless steps and chain steps allowed them to instantly rush to the enemy's side. As a rogue, although Soren did not master these special fighting skills, he also had other ways to accomplish this. Soren slammed his foot on the wall, and then his figure flew out like a sharp arrow. He rushed over from the left side of the Baylor, and his curved sword turned into a stream of light and pierced the enemy's heart. The Baylor, who had been thwarted several times, seemed to be crazy. It almost did not dodge and slashed its sword at Soren as if it wanted to die with him. The powerful body of a higher demon made it difficult for it to die so easily. The flame body of the Baylor was no longer an ordinary thing. Just stabbing the heart could not kill it immediately. On the contrary, it was difficult for Soren to resist the power of the sword in the hands of the Baylor. Shadow leap. Time froze again. Soren flew out like a sharp arrow. This seemingly fierce attack went straight to the heart of the Baylor, but after rushing about 3 meters in front of his body, Soren's figure entered the reflection of the stalactite above the underground ruins. Then in the next moment, Soren disappeared into the shadow, and then appeared again in the shadow behind the Baylor. Shadow leap 7 meters. The fighting skills of a top rogue were undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Soren successfully launched Shadow Leap in less than a millisecond after entering the shadow, and then appeared behind the enemy in an instant. Sword form, waist slash. Shadow strike. Soren held his sword with both hands and slashed at the body of the Baylor in an instant. The hot demon blood spilled on his body along with the fire. Even at this moment he was still expressionless. But he looked so cold and ruthless, like the most terrible killing machine. This was his real strength at the peak of his strength. Only after transforming into a slaughterer, Soren's basic ability could support him to burst out with the real legendary combat power. P.S. If you have a recommendation vote, please vote for it. Chapter 410. The gentle sea breeze blew through the port of Mordor, and the sound of waves hitting the reef came from afar. There were people coming and going in the port, and merchant ships full of goods were docked near the port. Occasionally, a team of heavily armed and expressionless guards patrolled by. The merchants who came and went could not help but give way in awe after seeing them. Occasionally the legendary drows could be seen here, but they were not as evil as in the stories. They just looked a little cold and indifferent to everyone. These drows were quite strict in law enforcement, and the means used to bribe other guards did not seem to have much effect on them. Stephen Hogg jumped down from the deck, touched his money bag after landing, and then looked at the Billow Tavern on the south side of the port. This was a tavern run by a priest of the Sea Temple. On the other side of the dock was the more luxurious Golden Crown Inn, which was the best place to spend money in Mordor, with the most expensive wine and the most beautiful maids. However, Stephen was just an ordinary pirate. He couldn't afford to go to that kind of place. He just occasionally drank a few glasses of rum in the Billow Tavern. He was now a man with a family. Naturally, he needed to be more careful, so after thinking about it, he turned and walked towards Mordor City. Forget it. Stephen lowered his head and muttered, refusing his companion's invitation to go to the tavern for a night of fun. As he returned to his station, he thought to himself, now is the time to use money. The money I saved is enough for 300 Kindler. Enough to buy a piece of land in the city. I heard that the mainland is not very safe recently. I'll bring her and the child over after a while. Thinking of this, Stephen could not help but show a happy smile on his face. He was not young anymore. He was 35 years old this year, which was relatively old among pirates. As a human, Stephen felt that his physical energy was not as good as before after entering the age of 30. Although he had the strength of grade 2 and his combat experience was quite rich, after all, age was unforgiving. People in middle age could not avoid aging. This was the same even for advanced professions. In the last decisive battle with the pirate king Ashrod, Stephen was stabbed in the abdomen and lost a lot of blood at that time. Although he had recovered now, there were still some internal injuries. Stephen drifted on the sea for a long time. After so many years of life and death battles, he was already tired of it, so he planned to apply to join the city guards after handing over this mission. Change to a more stable job. In Stephen's long career as a pirate, he had followed many pirate leaders, but he had never met anyone like Sir Soren, who filled him with hope for the future. Order. Everything in Port Mordor was in good order because there was a strict order here. Although the law had not been fully established, the rules set by Sir Soren had always been strictly enforced. Anyone who challenged the rules would be mercilessly crushed. Stephen had never seen a pirate leader like Sir Soren who could control the rebellious pirates so well. Although some of the processes were bloody and cruel, that was only a small problem. As long as they got used to Sir Soren's order, they would find that their lives were not as bad as before. He didn't have to worry about being stolen and thrown into some stinking ditch after getting drunk, nor did he have to worry about his wealth falling into the hands of others after fighting to the death. You should be rewarded for your efforts. In Mordor, any job could allow people to support themselves. Even the most humble slave could get freedom because of hard work and live a good life in the city of Mordor. What reason did Stephen have not to believe that he would have a better future than those slaves who were freed? The money is almost enough. There was a paved road in the port that led directly to the city of Mordor. The neat road was repaired every once in a while. Stephen did not receive any education, so slightly complicated calculations were a bit troublesome for him. Although he had been spending money to learn words and arithmetic recently, unfortunately because of his age Stephen had been learning a bit difficult. So now he had to count with his fingers while he was on the road. With the merits I've made in the past, I should be able to buy the land south of Mordor at the most favorable price. Almost enough to buy 15 acres of land? Note, the size is about the same as an acre. 1 acre is about 6 acres now. These lands have been cultivated by slaves. Looking at the growth of the land, there should be a good harvest this year. After buying the land, I'll spend some money to buy 2 slaves from Shipwreck Bay to farm. Even if I'm old in the future, I can live a good life. When I get the land deed, I'll bring her and the children over. Then I'll spend some money to ask a priest to hold the wedding. An honest smile appeared on Stephen's face, which softened the hideous scar on the left side of his face and made him look less frightening. He had a lover. She used to be a prostitute in Shipwreck Bay. Her husband used to be a sailor, but unfortunately he died in a shipwreck. After her husband died, she struggled to raise 2 children alone. Unfortunately, it was too difficult for a woman to raise 2 half-grown children. In the end, she made up her mind and hooked up with men behind closed doors, relying on the sex business to support the 2 children. Then she met Stephen, a pirate who looked fierce but was very gentle to her. After crippling a drunkard who did not pay after sleeping with a woman, Stephen got together with her. She was a very gentle woman. She was not very beautiful and her voice was a little soft. She was 26 or 27 years old. Her waist was a little thick, but her skin was white. She was very gentle and good at housework. She would clean the room and have a big butt. At first glance, she was a woman who could bear children. As for the sex business, Stephen did not care so much. A woman who could make up her mind to do this kind of business to support children only made him feel awe. He was just a pirate. It was a bit too much to say that his hands were covered in blood, but there were definitely many people who died under his hands. There were people who deserved to die and there were also innocent people. Occasionally he would go to the temple to confess his sins. Once he even cried in her arms like a child. Maybe the older he got, the more soft-hearted he became. This time, when he went to Shipwreck Bay to escort goods, Stephen encountered a young thief. If it was in the past, he would definitely cripple the child's hand. But this time, when he saw the child's yellow face and thin body, he could not help but think of the 2 children. Not only did he let the thief go, but he also gave him a few silver dirhams. Because life was difficult, and the door was always half closed, the older of the 2 children had also done some sneaky things in the past. Now the 13-year-old child only had 8 fingers. Stephen was tired. He was not young anymore. In a few years he would be 40 years old. When a man reached 40 years old, he could only rely on rich experience to fight. He wanted to change to a more stable life. There was a woman. There was a group of lively children. A stable job, a stable home. So many years of wandering on the sea had honed him into a real man. He could fight bravely without fear of death in battle, but this did not mean that he wanted to live a life of uncertainty all the time. He was a little different from other pirates. Maybe when others reached his age they would become eager for all this. The gate of Mordor city appeared in front of him. Stephen could not help but speed up his pace and rush towards his station. He had his own house. Although it was only a small brick house after all, it was an industry that he fought for with his life. But most of the time he still stayed in the station because the house was empty. It was not as convenient as staying in the station. When he picked up the woman he would consider moving in. I have to buy some furniture too. Stephen thought so in his heart. He didn't know what he was thinking, but his face showed an expression that all men understood. Hey, there are 3 rooms. Maybe I should buy a bigger bed. At this time, there was a noise at the gate of Mordor city. Then a large pterosaur climbed out. Its head was much bigger than a cow. There was a rope around its neck. It seemed to be led by someone, but it was blocked. The pterosaur walked forward arrogantly without looking at the guards around. When it came out of the gate, it couldn't wait to flap its wings, blowing up the dust all over the sky. Okay. Little Black, stop it. I'll let you out to play now. A crisp child's voice came from behind. Although he still couldn't see the person, Stephen couldn't help but change his expression. He quickly bowed his head and knelt down on one knee. Miss? This was the treasure of Mordor. Her status in Mordor was similar to that of a princess. Everyone knew that Sir Soren valued her more than his life. Whoosh! The pterosaur's figure rose into the air. Then Vivian, who was standing at the gate in a black princess dress, appeared in front of Stephen. The little girl didn't even notice Stephen kneeling on one knee. After letting go of the pterosaur's rope, she clapped her little hands gently and said, "Let's go. Lul. I'll take you to catch fish today." The petite cat girl was full of happiness when she heard this. She nodded desperately and said, "Meow. Catch fish. Lulu wants to eat grilled fish." Under the sun, Vivian held the little cat girl's hand and walked towards the beach. Stephen also quickly stood up and rushed to the station. He still had to hand over the mission today. Battle after battle. Desperate battles over and over again. Blood, slaughter, death. In the cruel and ruthless game of life and death, the city of Mordor finally stood on this overseas archipelago. Soren didn't just change the fate of Vivian. This city, which was full of vitality, changed the fate of many people. Vivian finally had a stable environment to grow up in. She could live a life her age should have in her free time. Happy, carefree, living like a child. After all, she was only 9 years old. And Soren. He would continue to move forward in the killing because of the promise and also because of the protection. Chapter 4:11. Fresh blood dripped down. Soren's breathing was a little rushed. Continuous high-intensity bursts of energy were quite taxing on his body, especially in a battle where the precision was on the millisecond level. It was a great test for his body. However, his current vitality was extraordinary. In just 1 or 2 seconds, Soren had already adjusted his breathing. Vitality not only affected his physical limits, but it also determined his endurance in battle. With his extraordinary vitality, Soren only needed to adjust his breathing a little, and he would be able to return to his peak condition. There was a burnt smell on his skin. Perhaps it was because he was burnt, but Soren didn't feel too much pain. The Baler standing in front of him wasn't any better. There were 7 or 8 wounds on its body, especially on its back, where Soren had directly hit it twice. Unfortunately, the Baler's vitality was too strong. With 31 vitality, Soren's attack should have cut it in half, but it was only able to injure its spine. The Baler's vitality was too tenacious. The HP of a high-level demon was basically above that of a legendary warrior. Soren was barely able to push it to the brink of death. The Baler was also panting. Even if it was as strong as it had lost a lot of blood and was heavily injured. The speed of its recovery was far from the speed of its recovery. The demon's madness allowed it to fight even when it was heavily injured and on the brink of death. It raised its heavy abyssal executioner sword again, and at the same time, waved its flame whip and rushed toward Soren. The flames on the Baler's body had dimmed a lot. There were only some flickering flames left on the flame whip, and then a dark green barb was exposed. This was the reason why Soren's left arm was heavily injured. The barb hooked onto the flesh of his arm, and then a piece of flesh was forcefully torn off. Soren's injury wasn't light. Although he had only been hit by the Baler once, that one hit had cost him nearly 100 points of damage. The flames on the Baler's body were too strong. Even with the power of icing death protecting his body, Soren was still slowly burned every time he got close to it. This kind of enemy was simply impossible for mortals to defeat. It was even more difficult to deal with than a giant dragon because ordinary people would be burned to ashes if they stood in front of it. Soren was already a little numb from the roasting. Icing death prevented him from burning directly. This legendary weapon's ability to extinguish magic flames was still in effect. However, a scorching aura penetrated deep into Soren's bones from his skin, making him feel as if his chest was on fire. His throat was so dry that it felt like it was about to split open. The silver light was still dazzling. The Baler's flames made it even colder. Soren held it in his hand like a block of ice. "I've already used up my shadow jump." Even if Soren was fighting at his peak condition, he still couldn't withstand a few jumps of 100 meters. Both sides were at the end of their tether. That was why Soren had no choice but to roll and dodge the Baler's crazy attacks. The huge abyssal beheading sword slashed the wall behind Soren, creating a 2-meter-long crack. At the same time, because of the Baler's strength, a crack appeared on the wall. "Go to hell, mortal." The Baler had made up its mind to force Soren into a corner. The enemy in front of it didn't dare to take a single hit from it, so it completely gave up on defense and used the most violent method to force Soren to take its attacks. Rumble. Soren could only dodge again. The Baler's strength was too high. He didn't dare to take it head-on even when he was in his slaughter form. Not to mention that the Baylor's body was huge. The abyssal beheading sword once again hit the ground. The terrifying brute force caused web-like cracks to appear on the wall. The wall rumbled and the cracks extended to the top of both sides' heads. Solon seemed to have discovered something in an instant. That was why when the Baylor swung the abyssal beheading sword again, he turned around and returned to his original position. The wind howled. The flame whip whipped towards Soren, and the abyssal beheading sword swept out. Rumble. The wall shook again and the cracks were very obvious. At this moment, Soren was almost forced into a corner. The Baylor's face showed a ferocious smile, and it suddenly swung the abyssal beheading sword at him. This damned mortal finally had no room to dodge. Clang. When the Baylor swung the abyssal beheading sword again, Soren gritted his teeth and held his sword with both hands to block the attack. Wuxia. Blood gushed out from the wound. Soren's whole body flew out as if he was hit by a speeding car. The huge force caused him to hit the wall with a bang, and his whole body couldn't help but tremble. Strength suppression. The huge difference in size and strength between the two sides made it easy for the Baylor to deal crushing damage. Crack. Soren hit the wall behind him. It was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. The cracks on the wall spread in an instant, and a shadow suddenly fell from the top of the Baylor's head. Rumble. A sharp cone-like stalactite hit the Baylor's head, and at the same time, a lot of debris fell to the ground. This level of damage couldn't kill the powerful Baylor. But in the case of the head being hit, the Baylor's attack was instantly full of loopholes. Its huge body became a burden at this moment, and most of the falling stones hit its huge body. Die. At this moment, Soren suddenly jumped out with a ferocious expression. His thin body easily crossed the falling boulder, and then after getting close to the Baylor, he suddenly reached out and pressed on it. Vampiric touch. A life force full of burning breath poured into Soren's body, and the injuries on his body suddenly recovered a lot. A strange fiery red color appeared on his pale face. Soren jumped up and gently touched the back of the Baylor. Then he held his sword with both hands and chopped at the Baylor's head. Sword form, beheading. A cold light suddenly appeared. Then blood gushed out crazily. The huge body of the Baylor was stiff in place. The next moment it suddenly seemed to be burning. The Baylor's body was full of raging flames. Its whole body looked like a huge fireball. Burning explosion. As one of the most difficult higher demons to challenge in the abyss, the Baylor's horror was not only its power, but more importantly, it would automatically activate a burning explosion talent ability after death. This talent ability would make the Baylor explode like a fireball, causing hundreds of explosion range damage to any enemy around it. Back then, countless people had died under the self-detonating corpses after killing their enemies. Boom. A violent explosion sounded and terrible flames surged out. Soren, who had just slashed the Baylor's head, was shrouded in a terrible explosion in an instant. Chapter 4:12. I'm back. Now there are a bunch of relatives' children over there. Fu Tu changed back to the original place to write. Today 3 chapters. Rumble. Suddenly there was a violent vibration from the ground. The dwarven juggernaut who was searching for loot, shook and almost fell to the ground. The others next to him also looked at each other with surprise and uneasiness. The desert warrior quietly put away a statue made of pure gold, and then turned to look at the few people present as if nothing had happened. What happened? The dwarven warrior picked up the well-preserved crystal on the wall and blew on it. Did something happen down there? He asked in a low voice. The 4 people present looked at each other. I don't know. The Ronin held his weapon in both hands and frowned slightly. The captain's expression just now seemed a bit wrong, and the hostility on his body was too strong. I guess something big must have happened down there. The desert warrior rolled his eyes and said with a meaningful expression, I heard that there are demons sealed in such underground ruins. The movement just now didn't look good. The oriental dancer's face changed slightly, and a trace of worry appeared on her beautiful face. She suggested, should we go down and find him? No. The desert warrior decisively rejected. He glanced at the others and said in a deep voice, just now the captain asked us to stay here. We don't know the situation here at all. If we go down rashly, if there is something terrible down there, I'm afraid we will all die here. Speaking of this, the desert warrior could not help but lower his voice and said, I think everyone has a good harvest today and more importantly no one was injured. Why don't we stop here today, go up and divide the loot first and then wait for the captain to come out. Anyway, he is a very powerful rogue. If he wants to leave, there are very few people who can stop him. If he can't leave, we will die if we go. He wanted to slip away. The situation in the underground ruins was a bit wrong. The vibration just now caused some places to collapse. It was likely that something big had happened down there. Not many people were injured in the previous few battles. After Soren left, they found some chests and secret rooms. They found quite a lot of valuable loot. Even if they divided it up, there were still several thousand Kindler coins. Since the situation was not right, everyone had found a lot of spoils of war. Fortunately, no one was injured. The desert warrior already had the idea of leaving as soon as he could. After all, he and Soren were only in a temporary party, and they didn't have much of a relationship with each other. It wasn't strange for them to run away as soon as they saw that something was wrong. The desert warrior's words obviously attracted the approval of one person. The Ronin stroked his sword silently. He had come to the desert area to train. He had only accepted this mission because he didn't have enough money. The situation here was a bit dangerous. He had encountered a legendary ancient mummy so easily, and this was only the second floor of the underground ruins. He didn't want to lose his life here. Since he already had the spoils of war and he wasn't injured, leaving with the benefits to continue his cultivation was undoubtedly the wisest decision. The dwarven juggernaut looked a little hesitant. It seemed that he wanted to leave, but he felt a little guilty. The dwarven race was still more credible. Leaving in this case meant abandoning his comrades. Among the people present, the one with the most complicated expression was undoubtedly the Oriental dancer. Her face looked wavering as if she wanted to stay and leave. After all, Soren had just saved her life. Reason told her that leaving now was the wisest decision, but she felt that it was too much to do so. The difficulty of the underground ruins was a bit high. She knew very well what was below. If Soren really encountered that kind of monster, she was afraid that the possibility of him coming back alive was not high. Baylor. It was difficult for a legendary rogue to kill a Baylor alone. Rumble. After the explosion from the underground caused the first batch of collapses, it seemed to have broken the support in some places, which obviously formed a chain of collapses. There were sounds of collapsing in many places and a large amount of dust fell here. We can't stay here any longer. The desert warrior looked at the others and said in a deep voice, "If you want to stay, then stay. I'm ready to leave. It looks like this place may collapse. Maybe we will be trapped here." After that, he ran directly towards the square. The Ronin glanced at the others and quickly followed. This was a desert area. If the hole above was blocked by the collapse, it would be very troublesome to get out. The dwarf hesitated, glanced at the Oriental dancer and said, "Shall we go out too?" The Oriental dancer's expression gradually calmed down. She glanced at the dwarven juggernaut in front of her and said, "No. I'm going to go down and see. After all, he just saved me. I can't abandon him like this. I will definitely feel guilty about this in the future." Hearing her words, a trace of guilt appeared on the dwarf warrior's face. Immediately, he took out a few bottles of healing potions and a bottle of fiery red potion, threw them to the Oriental dancer and said in a deep voice, "I'm sorry. I'm going to leave here. This is the healing potion bought from the temple, and a bottle of strength potion from the Grey Valley dwarves. It can temporarily improve your combat effectiveness. Good luck." The dwarven juggernaut picked up his axe and ran out. A lot of dust had fallen here and there were vibrations in the distance. The Oriental dancer glanced at their backs, gritted her teeth and ran into the dark passage ahead. "I'm just doing this for the mission." The Oriental dancer rushed into the dark passage and muttered to herself, "The mission given by the Empress has not been completed yet. If I go back like this, she will definitely be unhappy. Yes. I have to go in and see. He shouldn't die so easily, right?" The surrounding scenery flew back quickly. The vibration in the distance continued to come. There should be a fault below, so many ruins collapsed. Boom. The Oriental dancer turned to avoid a falling stone and then stopped. There was a big pit in front of her. It was obviously blown up by a terrible explosion. Below it were all large and small pieces of debris. The road here had been cut off. If she wanted to go, she could only jump down and then find a passage to move forward. But at this moment, a rather embarrassed figure climbed up from the fracture in front. "You're not dead?" The Oriental dancer's face glowed in an instant. She seemed to be relieved and said, "Great." Bah. Soren spat a mouthful of saliva after climbing up. His blood was mixed with dust. He was almost directly shrouded in the initial big explosion. If he hadn't reacted quickly enough to resist the explosion, he might have been buried alive. Soren's whole body was gray, and there was a thick layer of fallen sand on it. He spat out the soil in his mouth, raised his hand to wipe his face and then said, "Why are you here? Where are they? Soren glanced behind him and found no trace of other people. At this time the Oriental dancer didn't even need to speak. He seemed to already know everything and said slowly, "Gone? TSK. This kind of temporary team is really unreliable at critical moments." Get. The Oriental dancer, who just wanted to say something, suddenly saw Soren raise his hand and throw a gem with a strange luster. She quickly reached out and took a look at it. Her face immediately showed surprise. This was the task item she needed. Rumble. There was a sound of collapse behind them. Soren's face changed slightly. He rushed up quickly and said in a deep voice, "Let's go first. The bottom has been blown up. Even this area might collapse." The two sprinted toward the original road at high speed. Soren seemed to be seriously injured. The dust on his body was all stained with blood, and it was mixed together and condensed into blood clots. Even though their speed wasn't slow, by the time they arrived at the square, it was already pitch black. All the torches were extinguished, and the position of the dug passage was blocked by falling sand. The passage collapsed. This kind of temporarily dug passage could not withstand such a collapse, but the others seemed to have escaped in advance. What should we do now? The Oriental dancer glanced at Soren and whispered, "The passage has collapsed." Clang. Soren turned and glanced at her. He raised his hand and threw a shovel over. He said angrily, "What else can we do now? Dig out." Chapter 413. Bah. The Oriental dancer was all wet with sweat. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat on her forehead with the shovel in one hand, and immediately a white and delicate skin appeared in the dust. Digging in a sandy environment, if she wasn't careful, she would be covered in dust and sand. Now, a beautiful woman had become like a beggar, spitting out a mouthful of sand. The structure of this underground ruin was not very good. If she dug a little bit, the quicksand would pour down. Just now she was almost buried. Ho ho ho. The Oriental dancer opened her mouth and gasped for breath. After turning around and glancing at Soren on the side, she couldn't help but complain, "Hey, haven't you rested well? How long will it take for me to finish digging?" At first, Soren threw a shovel to her. She thought it was two people digging up, but she didn't expect that she was the only one doing it. After a long time she only dug a little bit. If this continued, she didn't know how long she would be trapped. As for Soren, he had been sitting there to rest for almost 5 or 6 hours now. Every time she was tired from digging or after being drenched by sand from head to toe, the Oriental dancer would look back at Soren. He was still sitting cross-legged there. Every time she looked at him, there would be more resentment in her eyes. "He's not a gentleman at all," the Oriental dancer muttered in a low voice. Then she raised her hand and moved her long hair. Her hair was full of dust, which was very uncomfortable for someone who loved cleanliness. After digging for a long time she sweated a lot. The sweat mixed with dust stood on her body, making her feel as if she had been rolling in mud at the moment. But after complaining for a while, she finally dug hard because she could see that Soren was seriously injured at the moment. In fact, Soren was seriously injured now. Under the burning explosion of the baler, he was directly put into a state of near death. The reason why he could still move freely now was entirely because of his extraordinary constitution. At this moment, Soren seemed to be resting, but in fact he was rememorizing spells. The Oriental dancer didn't know that Soren was still a wizard. Naturally, she thought that Soren was resting and recovering. Moreover, other wizards needed to take out a spellbook to memorize spells. She had never seen a wizard like Soren who relied entirely on memories to memorize spells. Although he paid a lot of slaughter EXP, the spells that Soren currently mastered were all imprinted from memory. He didn't need a spellbook to memorize spells, and he basically didn't have a spellbook on him. Oh. Soren slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at the Oriental dancer who was working hard in front of him, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Now, the Oriental dancer was no longer as charming as she was at the beginning. She was completely a country woman covered in mud. Her appearance was really pleasing to see. There were a lot of messages prompts in front of him. The top one was, "Attacked by balers, incineration explosion. Condition reflex passed. You successfully avoided the core area of the explosion. You received 52 points of explosion damage. You received 12 points of fire damage. Critical point triggered. Ability breakthrough. Your ability, minor fire resistance, has been upgraded to minor fire resistance. Critical point triggered. Ability breakthrough. Your ability, minor fire resistance, has been upgraded to medium fire resistance. The Baler was a ball of fire. Soren was suffering from fire damage from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for the support of the power of icing death, which could extinguish the magic flames on his body, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. So after the battle, the first thing that broke out was the fire resistance that Soren had originally trained. It actually increased from minor fire resistance to medium fire resistance in one breath. Medium fire resistance, personal ability. The power of divinity allows you to increase your resistance against fire damage. From now on, you are immune to any fire damage below 5 points. When attacked by spells or spell-like attacks, any damage with fire effects will be reduced by 10 points. With the strengthening of the power of divinity, the effect of your fire resistance ability will gradually increase. Eventually, you may be immune to fire damage. Resistance was a very useful ability. After upgrading to high resistance, it could greatly increase survivability. However, if you wanted to be immune to a certain type of attack, you may need a more powerful ability. This was the domain of the gods. Soren currently had 2 types of resistance: minor cold resistance and medium fire resistance. Below were some other data. You have killed the Baler, extracting the target's soul energy. You have gained 165,100 slaughter EXP. The target has divine ability. Divine power activated. Absorbing the target's remaining divinity. Divine transformation. You have gained 5 divinity points. More than 160,000 slaughter EXP. Although it was not enough for Soren to advance into the legendary realm, it was not much less than that. He still needed to get another elemental stone on this trip. At that time, it should be enough for him to advance into the legendary realm. As for the 5 divinity points, this surprised Soren. He did not expect to get so many divinity points from killing a high-level demon. It was a pity that this kind of thing was difficult to encounter again. After all, the difficulty of challenging a high-level demon and a demigod was not much different. But it was not surprising. The demons of the abyss had always had a divine bloodline. Many powerful demons clearly did not have divinity and clergy, but they could still use part of the power of the gods. This was the divine bloodline that they had. The children of the abyss demons. This time he was lucky to kill the Baler. Soren knew very well that if the opponent was not sealed here, he would have almost no chance of winning in a head-on battle. If he wanted to deal with such an enemy in the future, he would have to wait for the arrival of the Avatar crisis before entering the bottomless abyss. At that time, the Baler would be the backbone of the first batch of demons. When the Avatar crisis began, the bloody war in the abyss came to an end temporarily. The demons and devils turned their attention to other planes. Patter. Soren stood up slowly. He took out a shovel and began to dig silently. The most important thing now was to leave this place. About 3 hours later, another message appeared in front of him. War of the Baler, legendary battle. In early April 1676 of the New Moon era, you encountered a sealed Baler in the ruins of the ancient Arcane Empire. After a tough battle, you finally defeated this powerful enemy. The fall of a high-level demon made your existence begin to be noticed by the abyss. The Baler you killed is a descendant of an ancient Baler. Your existence will be sensed by some powerful demons. Legend +2, it was a little strange. Soren only got 2 legend points. Logically speaking, the Baler should be the most powerful monster he had challenged so far. But the legend points it gave him were only 2. Moreover, this time the legend points appeared very quickly. It seemed that it did not take a long time to appear like in the past. This made Soren fall into deep thought. Why is it like this? Soren thought quickly in his mind and secretly said, this Baler is so powerful. Why is it only 2 legend points? Even in naval battles legend points are higher than it. Could it be that the legend points are not directly related to the enemy's strength? Or are there other conditions that determine how much legend points are? Soren frowned slightly because he seemed to have found something. The legend points were not necessarily the more powerful the enemy was. Of course, defeating a powerful enemy would naturally give more legend points than defeating a weak enemy. But there seemed to be a benchmark that determined the number of legend points. Audience. Many of the legend points that Soren got in the past were because of the wide range of spread. Many battles were not as dangerous as today, but the legend points obtained were very high because these things were spread far and wide. But today, Soren didn't seem to have an audience at all. He wouldn't go to the tavern to brag about how he killed the Baler. Among all the people, only the Oriental dancer vaguely guessed that Soren defeated the Baler. Maybe this was why the legend points were low. Chapter 4:14. Soren was trapped. In fact, he and the Oriental dancer were trapped in the underground ruins for a whole day and night. By the time they finally dug out a tunnel and returned to the surface, the two of them were already a little exhausted. It looked like they had crawled up from the ground after rolling in the ground. Soren's body was a little better. After all, he was wearing tights. He just shook off the sand and mud on his cloak. But the Oriental dancer was wearing a long dress. When she climbed out, her whole body was gray. Only when she occasionally wiped her sweat would she wipe off the dust, revealing a piece of white skin. Finally, I climbed out. When the Oriental dancer came to the ground, she threw away the shovel directly, then sat on the sand unladylike, and then jumped up as if she had been electrocuted. At this moment, although the sky was getting dark, the temperature in the desert area was still very high. There were no traces of laborers and other teammates nearby, but there was a lot of garbage not far away. The wind and sand during the day were very strong. They had probably taken away everything that could be taken away. Now there was only garbage left on the entire ruins. Soren reached out and pushed the sand away. He touched the burnt charcoal and said in a deep voice, "They left not long ago. They should have packed up and left in the morning." The Oriental dancer came over and nodded gently. "These guys." "Forget it." Soren shook his head indifferently. He had seen too many things worse than this when he was in the Underdark. At least this time the people he met did not stab him in the back. He looked up at the sky and said slowly, "Let's rest here for a night. We will leave tomorrow." "You have found what you want. We will separate tomorrow. Since you plan to go back to the Eastern Kingdom, let's leave early. It won't be long before this place becomes a place of trouble." The Oriental dancer nodded gently, and her eyes fell on Soren. She looked at him quietly for a while, and then a faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She said softly, "Thank you." Soren waved his hand and said nothing. He just said, "I'm going to find some water. There should be an oasis nearby." Water. Hearing Soren's words, the Oriental dancer suddenly felt very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but quickly follow up and whisper, "Is there an oasis nearby? I'll go with you." There should be an oasis nearby. Because an adventurers' gathering place had once been established here, it was very difficult to resupply in the desert. The area near the underground ruins had been explored before they found this oasis as a camp. Soren followed his memory and soon saw a patch of green in the distance. A very small oasis. It was probably only about 100 meters wide. There were all kinds of vegetation growing on all sides as well as some tall trees. In the middle was a deep pool. It was a miracle in the desert that an oasis could be preserved in such a place with such strong sandstorms. Great! The Oriental dancer couldn't help but speed up her pace. When she came to the pool, she leaned over and drank a few mouthfuls. Then she held the water and washed her face. As the dust on her face was washed away, a charming face was also revealed. It had obvious Oriental characteristics and looked full of exotic charm. After she washed her face, her expression suddenly became a little shy. There was a slight blush on her charming face. She turned to look at Soren next to her. It seemed that she wanted to say something but couldn't. Soren was also washing his face. The cold water made him breathe a sigh of relief. He simply wiped his body and then noticed the Oriental dancer's gaze. "What's wrong?" Soren frowned slightly. The Oriental dancer's expression was a little shy. She seemed a little embarrassed, but she still whispered, "I want to wash up. Can you wait for me outside first?" It turned out that she wanted to take a bath. Soren stood up helplessly. He glanced at the dusty and embarrassed appearance of the opposite side and said, "Okay, I'll wait for you outside." Soren turned and left. After the Oriental dancer confirmed that he had gone out, she carefully untied her belt, but she still quietly glanced back and whispered, "I don't know if he will peek. Such a powerful rogue, if he turns around and sneaks back, I guess I can't find him, right? I don't care so much. I'd better take a bath first." The long skirt on the Oriental dancer's body was taken off, revealing a pair of slender legs. She explored the water with her feet, and then slowly unbuttoned her blouse. Her full breasts were like white jade in the moonlight. The Oriental dancer slowly entered the water with her hands in front of her chest. The water was sparkling and her white legs and slender waist were faintly visible. She sighed contentedly and then began to wash the dust on her body. "He is a good man. It's a pity that the person I like is D. Otherwise he would be really good." The Oriental dancer's whole body was soaked in the water, and her wet long hair spread out like water plants. She gently wiped her face and some thoughts ran wild in her mind. Her face was slightly red and she said, "Is he peeping?" In fact, she really thought too much. Soren walked out from the beginning. He was not interested in peeping at others taking a bath. In terms of beauty, Gloria was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. It was estimated that only Vivian might surpass her when she grew up in the future. So with Gloria, Soren was not so thirsty that he would turn around and peep at others taking a bath. Faint moonlight. Soren stood on the edge of the oasis and waited quietly. But when he felt that it was almost time to go back, there was a slight noise in front of him. Someone was approaching. Soren's figure instantly disappeared into the darkness, and then quietly moved in stealth. A person. A woman. Before Soren got close to the target, he saw a tall figure with long black hair hanging down naturally. He could recognize that it was a woman at a glance. The other party was wearing tight clothes, revealing the exquisite curves of her body. Her facial features were oriental, but she was taller than the northern woman. But this was not the key point. The key point was that Soren did not see any weapons on her, only a pair of black gloves. Who? A cold voice sounded, and then the woman in front of Soren stopped. Her figure flew up in an instant and directly locked onto Soren's position. Then she turned into a shadow and approached Soren. Her leg was mixed with a whistling wind, and she kicked at Soren with an amazing momentum. There was no sign of it. Soren didn't even know how the enemy determined his position. He could only be sure that he was not directly exposed. The other party seemed to be able to find him because of some supernatural ability. Was I discovered? Soren's expression was a little surprised. The rolling sand exposed his position. Bang! In the face of the enemy's high-speed kick attack, Soren had no time to dodge or draw his sword. He could only block it with his hands in front of his chest. Accompanied by the dull sound of flesh colliding, Soren took a little half-step back. The vigorous figure quickly retreated after colliding with Soren. She floated in the air like a goose feather and landed on the ground. Her eyes instantly became fierce and she said, "Rogue?" Clap. The woman in front of him clapped her hands together. As her palms clapped together, a faint magic aura immediately appeared on the gloves, followed by a jumping arc between her palms. This strange arc kept jumping in her palms, but it was not her own ability. It should be the power of the pair of gloves. This was a very special rare weapon. Lunge sideways raised her hand. The familiar posture made Soren's expression dignified for a moment. He slowly pulled out his curved sword Icing Death and said in a deep voice, "Pugilist." Pugilist. This was the first time Soren saw a woman advance into a pugilist. As an advanced extension of the monk profession, although there was no mandatory advancement requirement for a pugilist, it was extremely rare for a woman to advance into a pugilist as a profession. Soren had seen a female priest advance into a pugilist's modified version of Divine Fist in the past, but he had never encountered a female profession that accepted the orthodox pugilist's cultivation. Moreover, the opponent's strength seemed to be not below his. Chapter 4:15. Landslide. The tall figure came like a storm. As an advanced profession that leaned towards the monk class, the strength of a pugilist was basically above the advanced level. The woman in front of him kicked more than 10 meters away. Her figure flew through the air, and her slender and strong thighs rolled up the wind and sand, directly whipping towards Soren's abdomen. Clang. The curved sword Icing Death was instantly unsheathed, and Soren swung it horizontally. In the face of Soren's attack, the tall woman did not panic at all. Her slender and strong legs pulled back, and she actually rose directly from the ground. She continued to soar in the air without any relay point. Chi? Soren's pupils shrank in an instant, and he suddenly bent his body and stabbed his curved sword towards the opponent's lower body. Cloud ladder. Ethereal form. In the face of Soren's attack from below, the tall woman slightly frowned her beautiful willow-like eyebrows. She only saw her palms together and crackling lightning jumped in her palms. She swooped down towards Soren, and while her figure fell at a high speed, she strangely moved half a meter away. When she passed by Soren to avoid the attack, her palms turned into a gust of wind and hit Soren's vital parts. Gale attack. Arcs of lightning jumped in the air. Soren was shocked in an instant. He quickly protected his chest and blocked the enemy's attack. The opponent did not need a relay point at all. In the case of no foothold in the air, she could still launch continuous attacks. The enemy's fist hit Soren's body, but when she retracted her fist, Soren felt a shock in his chest. The force seemed to have passed through his arms and hit his internal organs directly. The subtle electric current jumped on Soren's body. Even with his strong physique, he felt numb all over. If it were anyone else now, they would have been paralyzed by the electric current. 1-inch punch? Soren's figure fell from the air, and his chest rose and fell violently. Suddenly, his throat moved and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. 1-inch punch. Or it could be said that it was internal force as well as hitting a cow through a mountain. It was a battle technique that could ignore the opponent's defense. Soren's defensive equipment was basically useless against such an attack, and the enemy's attack directly penetrated his internal organs. This was an ability that could turn a fully armored heavy soldier into an idiot. Under such a special combat technique, any physical defense would basically be rendered useless. Evade sight. Soren's figure disappeared as soon as he landed on the ground. The tall woman also landed on the ground. She furrowed her beautiful eyebrows and looked around. It was quiet all around. It was as if Soren had evaporated into thin air. There was no trace of him at all. Shadow leap. Soren's figure suddenly appeared from behind the enemy's shadow. His scimitar flashed with a cold light as it pierced towards the enemy's heart. However, the moment he launched his attack, the tall, slender woman clearly didn't notice his existence, but her body suddenly trembled, and she quickly turned around to avoid the cold light behind her. Evade instinct. Super sixth sense. When Soren realized that the enemy had actually dodged his attack, he immediately knew that things weren't going well. He immediately swung his scimitar horizontally. Clang. However, what happened next was a little different from his previous combat experience. The tall woman in front of him suddenly closed her palms and caught Soren's scimitar. Catching a blade with bare hands, crackling electricity appeared, and the electricity flowed along the weapon to Soren's arm. The tall woman in front of him sneered, and then suddenly twisted her waist. A pair of strong legs instantly clamped onto Soren's neck. Her legs locked onto Soren's neck, and then she suddenly used all her strength to flip him over onto the sand. Legendary. This woman was definitely a legendary pugilist. With such a reaction speed, such a predictive ability, Soren even suspected that she had mastered the terrifying ability, Sixth Sense. The tall woman stuck close to Soren. She was less than 5 centimeters away from Soren. At such a close distance, Soren could even feel her long black hair fluttering in the wind. Just as Soren was about to raise his scimitar, the woman's elbow hit his abdomen, and then her fist landed on his shoulder joint. In an instant, Soren's entire arm was completely numb, and he almost couldn't hold his scimitar. Elbow, knee, 1-inch punch. A series of continuous attacks landed on Soren like a storm, and he didn't even have the chance to fight back. Every attack Soren made would be detected by the enemy in advance, and she would instantly hit his weak points, making it impossible for Soren to fight back. Especially the pair of gloves that kept jumping with electricity. Although they couldn't do much damage to Soren, the electric arcs were a nightmare to Soren. Every time Soren was hit by the gloves, he felt like he was touching a high-voltage electric current. In this case, he might not even be able to use 30% of his usual combat ability. The close combat ability of a pugilist. Being stuck by the tall woman in front of him, Soren took more than 10 punches in just 1 or 2 seconds. He was like a human sandbag being hit by the opponent. If it weren't for his amazing physique and strong vitality, he would have been finished off by the opponent. Clang. In the face of the enemy's storm-like attacks, Soren finally made a decision. He directly let go of the scimitar in his hand, and instantly turned around and slammed into the opponent's body with his shoulder. Mountain lean. With the dull sound of flesh hitting flesh, the ferocious tall woman was finally knocked back a few steps by Soren. The distance between them was instantly pulled apart. Soren quickly reached for the scimitar on the ground, and the tall woman rushed forward and slapped him in the chest. Crackling electricity leaped about. A sneer appeared at the corner of Soren's mouth. He suddenly withdrew his hand that was grabbing curved sword icing death. The next moment, a pale golden cold light appeared in his palm. At the moment when the tall woman in front of him rushed over, he waved the fine gold dagger and stabbed the other party's chest. It was a trap. The tall woman's expression was stern. When the forward momentum disappeared, she instantly twisted her body and dodged. At the same time, her slender and strong thighs whipped Soren's chest. Bang! Both of them were sent flying. Soren pressed his hand on his chest and coughed slightly, while the tall woman pressed her hand on her elbow, where there was a slight bloodstain. If it weren't for her strong dodging ability, she would have lost half of her life. After all, a pugilist would not use other weapons except for boxing gloves, and would hardly wear any armor. Note: armor type is definitely the Sixth Sense. Soren gently moved his feet and placed the fine gold dagger in front of his chest. The pugilist's ability to rush forward was too strong. Once the distance was too close, the scimitar would become restrained. It was not as good as the small fine gold dagger. The woman in front of him should have mastered a supernatural ability like this sixth sense. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to continuously dodge Soren's attacks, and even predict the position of his attack. Soren also had the ability, danger sense, but when fighting with the tall woman in front of him, it was as if it didn't exist at all. The only explanation was that she had a more powerful supernatural ability that completely suppressed Soren's danger sense. Expeditious steps. The woman in front of him looked at Soren coldly. She took a hair band from her left arm and did not look at the bloodstain on her arm. She just gently tied up her long black hair. It was not until now that Soren noticed that there was still a hair band tied around her arm. After tying her hair into a neat ponytail, the tall woman's momentum suddenly became more aggressive. Seismic strike. 1-inch punch, landslide. The tall woman suddenly jumped up and swept through the air like a wild goose. Her long hair was tied into a single ponytail flying in the air, and she rushed toward Soren with a fierce blow. Stop. But just when Soren was about to face her with the fine gold dagger, the figure of the Oriental dancer suddenly appeared and shouted at the tall woman in the air, Stop fighting. He's not an enemy. Chapter 4:16. The tall woman's figure landed. However, she still moved her right leg forward and put on a half-bow posture, ready to attack again at any time. Soren also squatted slightly, holding the fine gold dagger in his hand, ready to fight at any time. The loss just now made him feel a little aggrieved. Even if it was a legendary fist master, he should not have been so helpless. What made him most afraid was not the opponent's fighting ability, but the damn gloves. The electric current was too disgusting for a rogue like him. There were all kinds of elemental attacks. Electric damage was the most likely to trigger negative statuses, which people who had accidentally touched household circuits knew. This pair of gloves might not be legendary equipment, but it was not far from it. The Oriental dancer quickly came to the tall woman's side, almost threw herself into her arms, then hugged her slender waist and said in a happy voice, Why are you here? The tall woman's attention was still on Soren and she whispered, I heard that the princess assigned you a task. I was a little worried about the difficulty of the task. I was afraid that you would be in danger, so I came here. Be careful of this man. He's very dangerous and seems very evil. The other party seemed to have seen the aura on Soren's body through some means. As the pirate king who ruled the 3 seas, if Soren used a detection spell on him, it would definitely be a very evil magic aura. There were many mysterious means in the East, but it was not a paradise for wizards. Professionals from the East seemed to be able to master some special abilities in their cultivation. Sixth sense. One of the most powerful supernatural abilities. The ability that Soren longed for but could not get. In fact, he had spent a lot of effort to get a weakened version of danger sense. If he wanted to get a more powerful sixth sense ability, he could only rely on some kind of adventure or enter the realm of the gods himself. As for the more advanced, super sixth sense, it was a legendary ability. The number of people in the world who had mastered this ability was less than 2 digits. Note, the sixth sense is equivalent to a natural superpower. It is basically impossible to train it. You can only master danger sense through training. When a legendary monk reaches a certain level, his perception may be further strengthened to the sixth sense ability as a natural-born supernatural ability. He's fine. The Oriental dancer raised her head and looked at Soren. The expression on her face was a little complicated. She said softly, I'll tell you this later. Can you stop now? He saved me once. They're not enemies. Why don't we sit down first? Hearing the words of the Oriental dancer, the tall woman raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly, then glanced at Soren and slowly withdrew her stance. Soren frowned slightly and looked at the Oriental dancer and her. Then he put away the fine gold dagger. He pulled out the curved sword icing death from the ground, and his eyes fell on the tall woman. Fist Master She was a very strong woman. However, Soren wasn't afraid of her if she used all her trump cards. Fist Master and Sword Saint had the same fighting style. They both pursued the extreme path. This kind of fighting technique might be very powerful, but it also had an obvious weakness. They could be killed in an instant if they seized the opportunity. This kind of advanced profession might be very powerful in a one-on-one fight, but if there were too many enemies, the situation would be very dangerous. In short, Soren had been punched by her more than 10 times, and now he was only a little injured. However, if she was hit by Soren once, then the injury would be very serious. Because Fist Master only wore gloves to fight, and there was basically no armor on his body. Note, Fist Master can't even wear leather armor. At most he can only wear arm guards. The woman in front of him did not wear arm guards. The group approached the oasis. The Oriental dancer whispered to her. It seemed that she was talking about what happened before. From time to time, the tall D would look back at Soren with a slightly surprised expression. Soren sat by the campfire and quietly wiped his curved sword. He seemed to be uninterested in their conversation. Wait a minute. D looked at Soren again and whispered, "You mean he may have killed the Baler below? How is this possible? Even I am no match for the Baler. With this man's strength, I'm afraid it's difficult to get close to it." The Oriental dancer glanced at Soren quietly and whispered, "It's probably true. It's all collapsed down there. But I didn't see it either. Maybe he didn't show his real strength just now, or it's because he's still injured." Dee shook her head gently as if she still didn't believe it. After a while, she slowly came to Soren and whispered, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, Yukari would be in danger today." Yukari? Was that the name of the Oriental dancer? Their names were really strange. They were all monosyllabic, and it seemed that they didn't even mention their surnames. Soren looked up at her. At this time he saw the real appearance of the woman in front of him. Willow leaf eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes, an oval face, a small cherry mouth, a high nose and long black hair. It seemed that from any angle, she had all the beautiful characteristics of an Oriental woman. Obviously, she had the kind of weak beauty with the aura of the East, but he didn't expect her to be so fierce and vigorous in battle. Full breast, slender waist, slender and strong thighs. Soren's eyes stopped on the white and slender thighs of the other party. It was not that he hadn't seen a pugilist before, but it was the first time he met a pugilist who could practice hidden power on the legs. Chi. Soren wasn't sure if it was the power of Chi, or the other party's talent was really amazing. However, the woman in front of him had undoubtedly left a deep impression on him. She had even mended some of the loopholes in his fighting style. Her kick, which seemed to be incomparably ferocious, was actually mixed with hidden force. In the future, it would be best to be more careful when encountering professionals from the East. He had traveled in the Eastern Kingdom in the past, but he hadn't received the training of the Eastern Kingdom. Maybe he could try it in the future. Even Droll and Rangers could learn from the professionals of the Eastern Kingdom. As a rogue, he should also have the opportunity to learn from them. Let's take a break. Soren stirred the bonfire, looked up at the dim starry sky and said slowly, "I'll keep watch. I'll leave tomorrow. Since you've got what you need, you should leave here early." As soon as he finished speaking, the Oriental dancer who came over could not help but tremble, but not because of Soren's words. She raised her hand and pointed to the sky in surprise. Her expression seemed a little horrified and she said incoherently, "Look. Look over there. Stars. No. It's the stars. It's falling." Soren immediately turned and looked in the direction pointed by the Oriental dancer. Dee also quickly looked up at the sky, only to see a star in the distance that suddenly became very dim, like a light bulb that was about to go out. Then it suddenly disappeared without a trace. But this was just the beginning. Just after its light completely disappeared, suddenly a very dazzling brilliance appeared in its original position. This was completely different from the light at the beginning. In the past, its light was like a star. Although it could be seen clearly, it was far away just like the earth in the starry sky. But now its light felt so close. It was as if it had been in two different latitudes before, but now it was in the same plane. The dazzling star crossed the sky, falling like a meteor. Although it only flashed for a moment, it still made people feel a strong shock. The kind of shock that could not be described in words. Soren stood up. He had been looking at the direction where the star fell, and his expression was unprecedentedly dignified. Because a god had fallen. He didn't know which god had fallen, but he knew that if such a vision appeared in the sky, then a true god must have fallen. He was dead. Even the high and mighty gods would die one day. Chapter 417. Soren was not on the south coast. No one knew when it started, but the news was spread out by others. The legendary pirate king was not on the south coast, and naturally, it inevitably caused others to be restless. There was no doubt about Soren's deterrence. His existence was a legend on the south coast. As long as he was in the south coast, no one dared to make any moves. But now there was news that he was no longer on the south coast. It was very likely that he was in the Frost Kingdom on the other side of the continent. This made many people who secretly spied on them to take action. The Pirate King of the Amazon. The Pirate King active in the Amazon Islands seemed to feel threatened by Soren's strength, but she did not launch an attack. Instead, she expanded the scope of her activities a little more than before. It was obvious. The territory under her control was about to connect to Soren's overseas route. But this was not the biggest threat on the south coast because the Pirate King of the Amazon had always been very cautious. She should not have any intention of going to war with Soren at the moment. Therefore their actions were only a test, a hidden provocation. The real threat was the Principality of Rossard. In the battle to defeat the Pirate King Ashrod, Soren also severely damaged the navy of the Principality of Rossard. He even killed the Duke of Red Dragon's wife once, forcing her to use life hiding to resurrect. This kind of hatred was very strong. To some extent, it was almost impossible to resolve. So after getting the news that Soren was not on the south coast, the navy of the Principality of Rossard immediately took action. This action alarmed the half-elf first mate who was guarding the eastern route. He could deal with the pirates in the east, but he could not deal with the Duke of Red Dragon's wife. Without any way to contact Soren, the only thing he could do was to ask for help from Mordor. Raging Sand Island. This used to be the base of the Pirate King Ashrod. Now it was the transit station of the eastern route that the half-elf first mate was in charge of. At this moment, the port was solemn as if a storm was coming. The Principality of Rossard's navy was moving abnormally. Through some unknown means they had secretly equipped more warships. There was news that the Amazon pirates were secretly supporting them, but there were no more specific sources of information. The only thing that was certain was that the navy of the Principality of Rossard had been replenished with a large number of warships and had rebuilt a powerful navy. In the entire south coast area, the only ones who could support them with so many things, other than the few nearby kingdoms, were the Amazonian women. It was impossible for the kingdom to send its own warships to support the navies of other countries, so the possibility of it being an Amazon woman was the highest. The Amazon Islands were originally overseas. The warships were their standing force, and it was not difficult for them to support the Principality of Rossard. A warship gradually approached Raging Sand Island. At this moment, many people had gathered at the port, including the half-elf first mate and other pirate leaders. They were all waiting at the port. The entire south coast. Other than Soren, there was only one other person who could make them wait so respectfully. Gloria's figure appeared on the deck. She was wearing a black wizard robe, and her face was covered with a veil. Even so, at this moment she still looked so beautiful, as if with a mysterious color. Next to her was little Vivian. Today Vivian was wearing a pure white princess dress, and behind her was Lulu, who looked a little confused. Finally, in the dark corner of the cabin, there seemed to be another figure wearing a wizard robe. She did not directly show up but stood quietly behind. Your Excellency. The half-elf first mate knelt on one knee, and the pirate leaders behind him all knelt on one knee and said, Your Excellency. Miss. Soren's intentions were becoming more and more obvious. His ambition made the enemy feel uneasy. Not only did his men understand something, but his enemies were also aware of something. Especially after taking over the west coast and the north coast, Soren's former enemies were obviously more and more uneasy. At the same time, some rules were quietly changing. The pirate leaders who used to be lawless, now began to learn the law and rules. They needed to learn how to become managers, because they were no longer pirates who ran away after robbing, but a ruling class that each had a territory to manage and build. Get up. Gloria walked gently like a noble princess. She reached out and took little Vivian, glanced at the other pirate leaders and slowly said, Let the others gather in the council hall. Yes. The half-elf first mate said respectfully. It could be said that in the whole south coast, besides Soren, only Gloria could control these unruly pirate leaders. Not only because of her identity in the Northern Witch Council, but also because of her strength. It could be said that since she followed Soren to the outer islands, Gloria's identity and status were destined to be extraordinary. In the absence of Soren, although she rarely intervened in the affairs of the outer islands, there was no doubt that she had the right to speak. Night fell. Gloria rubbed her forehead tiredly and then put down the file in her hand. The situation in the Eastern Sea route was not very good. The Principality of Rossard's navy was growing stronger, and the possibility of a war with them was too high. New hatred and old hatred. Gloria was also a powerful spellcaster. She knew how much the Duke of Red Dragon's wife hated Soren. Today they discussed in the council hall for the whole afternoon. All the intelligence showed that the Principality of Rossard may threaten the Eastern Sea route, and the female pirates of the Amazon seemed to be ready to make a move. These Amazonian women were not simple. They were not simple pirates. Behind them stood the Amazons and the Church of God that believed in the Storm Lord. Soren's expansion was too fast. Everyone in the vicinity felt threatened, and the number of enemies increased. "Sister Gloria?" Vivian's clear voice sounded. The little girl walked up with a plate of snacks and said very cleverly, "Look, I brought you some delicious food." Lulu followed behind like a little tail, looking at the exquisite snacks with a face full of desire. Just one look and one could tell that it was delicious. Meow. Gloria's beautiful face could not help but show a smile. She just opened her mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, her face changed slightly and she disappeared, leaving only a shadow. "Vivian, you stay here." Short distance teleportation. Gloria's figure appeared on the roof in an instant, and there was another figure that appeared with her. "Mother." She looked at the empty sky and said with a dignified face, "Let's force her out." A ray of magical light appeared. Gloria's figure rose into the air, and Fallen Witch, who was covered in a black robe, also flew up. In front of them. There was a strange chuckle, and then under the magic light, a figure wearing a fiery red dress with a pair of huge red dragon wings behind her appeared. "You are Gloria?" The figure was very hazy under the moonlight, but it was not difficult to identify her. Gloria's expression was very indifferent. She turned around and looked at Fallen Witch behind her and said slowly, "Mother, let me meet her. I just recently finished a little thing." Snap. Gloria raised her hand and snapped her fingers. This action seemed to be learned from Soren. A pale golden light appeared. A deck of tarot cards appeared in Gloria's palm. With a gentle wave of her white fingers, the tarot cards in her palm all fluttered in the air. 56 cards revolved around her body, shining with a strange arcane brilliance. These tarot cards were like mysterious runes that revolved around her body. Although only 56 cards have been completed, it should be enough to deal with you. With a smile on her face, Gloria gently flicked her finger on a tarot card. The next moment, a shocking bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, and the surging electric light directly struck the enemy in front of her. Lightning. A dark golden card emerged. This was a card that Soren had seen before. At this moment, it was held between Gloria's fingertips, but she didn't seem to want to use it. Tarot cards. There were a total of 78 cards, 22 main cards and 56 secondary cards. The dark golden card between Gloria's fingertips at the moment was the Queen of the 22 main cards. This dark golden card seemed to have a powerful magic that was completely different from the other 56 secondary cards. Chapter 4:18. Under the night sky it was quiet. Soren sat cross-legged by the campfire, holding the curved sword Icing Death with both hands on his knees. This was the cultivation method of the Sword Saint, a mysterious realm similar to meditation. At the moment when the mind was calm to the extreme, the sensory world would capture the tremor in an instant, so the Sword Saint's moves were always so accurate and fatal. This was also the basic cultivation to master the legendary ability, Insight into Weakness. For a rogue like Soren, it would take a lot of effort to master it in the future. Dee was also sitting cross-legged. However, she was not meditating, just sitting in a very ordinary meditation. Her whole person seemed very relaxed. She was vaguely similar to the boxing master Soren had seen before. The Oriental dancer rested her head on her slender and strong thighs. The relationship between the two women made Soren feel a little strange. He didn't know if they really just had a good relationship or there was some other special relationship. Dee in front of him looked like a gentle big sister at the moment, occasionally reaching out and stroking the long hair of the Oriental dancer. Her eyes were clear. Soren had never seen such clear eyes. It was a pure heart and a pure power. Body, spirit, soul. The cultivation of a boxing master was very similar to that of a monk. They could get a pure body through exercise and be completely immune to any disease effect. With further exercise, the physical body of a boxing master would gradually approach perfection, and they would be immune to any poison effect. When the cultivation reached a certain level, the spirit of a boxing master would become very pure, and their body and spirit would enter a mysterious state of emptiness. In the end, a boxing master would also cultivate to the realm of transcendence, like a monk. In simple words, The woman in front of him had cultivated to the point where spirit, chi, and spirit were integrated. Her clear eyes represented a real power. Your mind is not calm. Dee looked at Soren for a long time and suddenly said slowly, although you have extraordinary concentration, as long as your mind is not really calm, you will never feel the real way of cultivation. Soren slowly raised his head and said in a deep voice, what should I do? I can't teach you. Dee shook her head gently, took off the hairband behind her, and let her long black hair fall. She raised her hand and stroked the side of the Oriental dancer's face, whispering, in the Eastern Kingdom, everyone's way of cultivation is different. Even monasteries of the same school have different ways of cultivation. You have a very strong conviction. I can feel it. This is a very good thing. When you find the path of cultivation, this belief will become your greatest motivation. Dee paused for a moment before continuing, when I left my hometown, I met a droll. Like you, he comes from the other side of the continent. Although he has some mysterious magic that allows him to reach the Eastern Kingdom very quickly, he is still a magician. But in the end he still chose to travel on foot. He spent more than a year walking tens of thousands of miles, passing through forests, grasslands, deserts, and finally arrived at the Green Dragon Lake in the Eastern Kingdom. Before I left, he had already stayed there for 3 years. Every day he would plant trees, flowers, and grass, and then meditate there to cultivate. He said that he was comprehending the way of nature. Drill's way of nature is different from our path of cultivation. The power you use is not the same as ours. So if you plan to cultivate, you should find the answer from the source of your own power. At this point, Dee stopped. She slowly closed her eyes as if she was not interested in saying anything more. Soren was lost in thought. If the source of Drill's power was the way of nature, then where was the source of the power of rogues? Combat skills? No. In terms of combat skills, rogues were above many professions because they were the most proficient group of people. Soren looked at the bonfire and noticed the shadow under the fire. Shadow. He gently spread out his palm, his expression a little thoughtful. The source of the power of rogues should be the shadow. This was the only supernatural power they could use, and it was also the support of most supernatural abilities. But for this ability, Soren was not so familiar with it, nor did he have many clues to improve it. More often than not, it was more like a bloodline ability that penetrated into the body little by little with the improvement of profession level and strength. From the moment they advanced into rogues, their bodies began to adapt to the power of the shadow. The mysterious Eastern Kingdom. They seemed to have a completely different path. No wonder more and more professions went to the Eastern world in the past hundreds of years. Soren did not have many clues. After all, he did not know much about the cultivation of the Eastern Kingdom, but he was more familiar with something. That was the Sword Saint. The existence of the Sword Saint was the perfect combination of different profession systems on both sides of the mainland. They inherited the explosive power of the warriors on the mainland and also mastered the most mysterious Qi in the Eastern Kingdom. Qi/. This was the most iconic ability of the Sword Saint. It burst out one's combat power at the peak in an instant. Now all the sword moves that Soren had mastered were basically extended from the explosive skill of Qi/. Soren felt that there was a fog in front of him. He seemed to see something, but it seemed that he did not see anything. He thought of the storm Ronin he first encountered. Although it was an advanced profession of the ranger warrior, its combat skills obviously had traces of storm attack. Maybe I should go to the Eastern Kingdom again when I have the chance. Soren stood up slowly. He turned his head and glanced at Dee behind him. He whispered, "It's almost dawn. Let's part here. Take care of yourselves. I hope we can meet again when we have the chance." A glimmer of light gradually appeared on the horizon. Soren turned and walked away without saying much. The Oriental dancer also slowly opened her eyes. She watched Soren's back as he left. Her expression was a little complicated, a little reluctant, but in the end, it turned into calmness. "Let's go too." Dee slowly stood up and gently stamped her feet. The sand in front of her collapsed and buried the bonfire. She turned and stroked the side of the Oriental dancer's face. She slowly said, "The princess is still waiting for us to go back. Recently, the monasteries all over the country seem to have taken action. I'm worried that the evil things underground will run out again." Guarding the evil things. From the fall of the Arcane Empire to the present, the ancient evil things sealed underground had always been the great enemy of the entire Eastern Kingdom. The two tall figures gradually went away. Before leaving, the Oriental dancer looked behind her again. Soren's figure had gone far away. She could only vaguely see a small black dot. The wind and sand gradually spread. This desert was the border between the two countries, and it was also the place where the arcane empire was really destroyed. In this desert, there used to be the most brilliant arcane civilization that radiated throughout the multiverse, but now it had become the most barren and dangerous desert of death. Energy radiation destroyed everything. This desert covered more than a quarter of the land of the entire continent and also isolated the two countries for thousands of years. It was not until the ascetics from the east appeared and the south coast opened the eastern route that the connection between them began to gradually increase. However, for ordinary people, the Eastern Kingdom was still an unreachable, unknown place. The Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Recently there was one more famous person in Arendelle. That was the descendant of Queen Isabella, Lady Adele Isabella. In other parts of the continent, it was not so easy for a woman to get a title, but in Arendelle there was no such concern. This Adele Isabella was the new favorite of Arendelle. She not only had a noble bloodline, a beautiful face and amazing wealth, but also had a close relationship with Princess Anna of Arendelle. She would be invited to almost every palace banquet and always sat beside Princess Anna. She was like Princess Anna's closest friend. Her existence was even heard of by other kingdoms in the south. After all, the bloodline of Queen Isabella had different meanings. It was also on this day. The new famous person in Arendelle, Lady Adele Isabella, left here. She was going to take a merchant ship to the south coast because she still had her own business in Shipwreck Bay. The news had spread to the kingdoms on the south coast. Many of the nobles in the south began to arrange for people to meet this woman with a noble bloodline. Her beauty, her wealth, her status, all of them made the nobles in the south restless. A woman with a noble background could not only increase the value of the family, but also share a huge wealth through her. They could also build a relationship with the rich Arendelle. Both the woman and the wealth. Many nobles in the south were planning their own wishful thinking. Soren's plan had begun to brew. Chapter 419. About 300 kilometers south along the desert, there was a special place where there was a volcano, but it had not erupted for hundreds of years. This volcano was Soren's destination, and the third elemental stone was on the altar near the volcano. Fire elementals were the most difficult to deal with among the four major elements, but for Soren he had just killed a Baylor, so dealing with some fire elementals was as easy as child's play. With his current fire resistance and the power of the curved sword icing death, he was basically not afraid of the fire on their bodies. But there was also something here that he was more afraid of. A dragon. Dragons had always lived all over the world, but most of them did not like places with human activities, so many dragons built their lairs in deserted areas. And Soren's current location naturally met all the conditions of a dragon, so his destination was actually the territory of an adult dragon. Although it was not the first time Soren fought against a dragon, he was not naive enough to think that he could easily fight a dragon alone. Especially the dragon entrenched here, it was not so easy to deal with. It was a brass dragon. The brass dragon was a dragon of the chaotic good alignment. It was different from the pure-blooded dragon Soren had encountered in the past. The brass dragon belonged to the metal dragon, while the red dragon and the white dragon belonged to the pentashade dragon. Most of the metal dragons were dragons of the good alignment, so they were not very aggressive. Unfortunately, as an evil alignment, the danger of the metal dragon was not much different from the pentashade dragon to Soren. This was the disadvantage of the evil alignment. It was easy to fight with the good alignment, but it was also easy to fight with the evil alignment. The one entrenched here was an adult brass dragon. Its existence had long been known by others, and even a desert caravan had encountered it and called it Desert Wind. The brass dragon was a very special kind of dragon. The reason why they were special was because they had a special characteristic, and that was that they liked to talk nonsense with others. There was a passage that recorded them like this. Brass dragons are extremely talkative and can speak well. Sometimes they can provide some useful information for adventurers, but it usually takes a long time of chatting and hinting that they want to give it a gift before the brass dragon will tell the news. The pupils of a brass dragon will gradually darken with age, until they look like molten metal balls. Brass dragons like dry, high temperatures. They spend most of their time bathing in the scorching sun of the desert. They give off a strong smell of metal or sand. They like to build their nests in high caves. Brass dragons can eat almost anything, but they usually eat very little. They can get nutrients from the morning dew. Since the habitat of brass dragons and blue dragons was the same, blue dragons were the most dangerous enemies for brass dragons. If it's a one-on-one battle, the bigger blue dragon will have the upper hand. For brass dragons, talking to adventurers is more attractive than fighting. That was right. You didn't read it wrong. Brass dragons were labeled as extremely talkative, good at speaking, likes to chat, and so on. In the simplest and most straightforward words, brass dragons were the talkative kind among the pure-blooded dragons, and they were born to be talkative. There was such a saying back then. What's the easiest thing to produce in the chaotic camp? Without a doubt, it's a joker. Note, since ancient times, chaos has produced jokers. Brass dragons. They were the jokers among the dragons. They were born chaotic, kind, and talkative. Not only were they jokers, but they were also the battle bee of jokers. The place where Soren was now. It was the territory of the brass dragon called the Desert Wind. It once did a very funny thing. It kidnapped a team of adventurers. Then it forced them to chat with it for 3 days and 3 nights. After satisfying its desire to be a chatterbox, it released the adventurers who were about to be played to the point of breaking down. Because it didn't do anything bad, and its strength was quite strong, no one came to crusade against this brass dragon. Basically, this desert area was its independent kingdom, and it lived here well until the end of the Avatar crisis. Maybe most of the guys who were born to be funny were lucky. Anyway, Soren didn't hear of anyone who killed it. Note 1. There are not many brass dragons and most of them live in the deserted desert. Note 2. Because of living in the deserted desert, the brass dragon's desire as a chatterbox often cannot be satisfied. A volcano appeared in front of Soren's eyes. Fortunately, the figure of the brass dragon did not appear. The dragon slept for a long time in its life. It was not difficult to find the elemental altar. Because all the elemental altars had a symbolic feature, there was an elemental nearby. So if you found the fire elemental, you could find the location of the elemental altar. Fly. Soren carefully looked around the volcano, and soon he found traces of the fire elemental. It was not difficult to deal with these fire elemental. Soren's fire resistance was enough to ignore the fire on their bodies, so it was easy to kill a large number of them. Slaughter EXP was constantly accumulating. When Soren cleaned up a lot of the fire elemental near the elemental altar, he gradually approached the center of the altar. Then he began to look carefully. Time went by little. Soren's expression became more and more puzzled. At last, he frowned and stood in place, seeming to be lost in thought. The fire elemental stone was not here. This was a very strange thing because according to the information in his memory, the location of the 4 elemental stones should not be wrong. Although the specific details were not announced at that time, the general location would not lie. The fire elemental stone should be here. Soren's previous 2 elemental stones were obtained from the altar. Why couldn't he find the fire elemental stone here? He did not give up and looked again. Unfortunately, he still found nothing. However, Soren found the hidden compartment of the elemental stone. It was empty. The fire elemental stone was taken away. This discovery suddenly made Soren feel troubled, because the 4 elemental stones could not be missing. If it was really taken away by someone, he did not know if he could get it back. Even if he could find it back, he did not know how much time it would take. Now Soren was in a race against time, and he could not afford to spend too much energy on it. If the fire elemental stone was really missing, he was afraid that he could only give up. Just when Soren could not find any clues at all, suddenly a voice came from above him. Hey! Where did this rogue come from? How dare you come to my place and steal things? The voice was very loud. But there was a hint of naivety in it. When Soren heard this voice, he almost turned over and retreated in an instant. At the same time, he pulled out his curved sword, icing death with a clang. He bent his body slightly and squatted down, ready to fight at any time. Me. When Soren raised his head and looked forward, his expression suddenly froze. Standing about 50 meters in front of him was a little lowly about 1.2 meters tall. She was wearing a golden princess dress with broken lace, inlaid with dazzling gems. Her pale blonde hair hung down naturally. Her face looked very cute, but her expression was old. At this moment, she stretched out a pink finger and pointed at Soren in front of her. She pouted and said, Hey, I'm asking you a question. Why did you come to my place to steal things? Hey, are you mute? Are you an idiot? Are you scared by my domineering aura? Are you really scared? I can't be so unlucky, right? It's not easy to catch a human. Before Soren could speak, just when he was stunned, the little lowly in front of him had already said a lot of things. However, he seemed to know who she was. P.S. Today's 2 chapters. Take a break to recover your energy. Chapter 420. Brash Dragon. To be honest, Soren had a hard time connecting the cute little girl in front of him with an adult brass dragon. However, most dragons knew magic, so it wasn't that difficult for them to transform into human form. However, many dragons didn't like to transform. When they transformed into other creatures, their combat power would be weakened. Polymorph. Advanced Polymorph. There were many spells that could transform into a human. It wasn't easy to retain combat power. Most dragons rarely transformed into human form. They thought that this form was too weak. However, small creatures also had their own advantages. Occasionally, some dragons would prefer to be in human form. In this regard, the good metal dragons preferred to transform, while the evil pentashade dragons preferred to be in their dragon form. There were many reasons for this. For example, the pentashade dragons had more enemies and needed to maintain combat power at all times. The metal dragons had stronger magic, so it was easier for them to transform into human form. Here, I have to mention the dragon's combat power ranking and some of their general characteristics. Evil pentashade dragons. Red dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was volcanoes. Its dragon breath was fire. Its natural disposition was arrogant. Its strength was ranked first. Blue dragon, sky dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was sand. Its dragon breath was lightning. Its natural disposition was belligerent. Its strength was ranked second. Green dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was forests. Its dragon breath was poisonous. Its natural disposition was cunning. Its strength was ranked third. Black dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was abyss. Its dragon breath was acid. Its natural disposition was berserk. Its strength was ranked fourth. White dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was ice. Its dragon breath was frost. Its natural disposition was dark. Its strength was ranked fifth. Weakest, good alignment metal dragon. Gold dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was Dragon City. Its dragon breath was fire and lightning. Its natural disposition was arrogant. Its strength was ranked first. Silver dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was Dragon City. Its dragon breath was frost. Its natural disposition was passionate. Its strength was ranked second. Brass dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was sand. Its dragon breath was fire. Its natural disposition was talkative. Its strength was ranked third. Bronze dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was water. Its dragon breath was lightning. Its natural disposition was curious. Its strength was ranked fourth. Copper dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was barren mountains. Its dragon breath was poisonous. Its natural disposition was ranked fifth. Its natural disposition. These were the 10 most common types of pure-blooded dragons. There were also gemstone dragons, but unfortunately they were rarely seen in the material plane. Most gemstone dragons lived in elemental planes. Adventurers liked red dragons the most, many spoils of war, white dragons easy to deal with, and silver dragons affectionate by nature. Green dragons very cunning, brass dragons funny and talkative, and copper dragons, often mischievous, were the most hated. The metal dragons were slightly smaller than the pentashade dragons. Red dragons were the largest commonly seen dragons, but metal dragons had an advantage in spell casting. On the whole, the metal dragons were more powerful than the chromatic dragons. For example, the little lowly in front of Soren had always fought with the blue dragons, azure sky dragons, the most aggressive of the chromatic dragons. A dragon was still a dragon. Even though the person in front of him was a cute little lowly who didn't seem threatening at all, Soren didn't let his guard down at all. He stared at the other party's expression and slowly said, "I'm here to look for an elemental crystal stone." There was one thing that had to be mentioned. There was a very troublesome thing when dealing with the good metal dragons, and that was that they liked to use the spell, lie detection. If they were deceived from the beginning, there was a possibility that they would fight directly. Note, an important tip in the dragon's code. The little lowly in front of him raised her hand and gently lifted her light golden hair. She looked at Soren with her small mouth and blinked her pale golden eyes. She tilted her head and said, "It doesn't look like you're lying to me. Elemental crystal stone? Let me think about it. Yes, is it this thing?" The little lowly raised her hand and gently waved it. The space in front of her directly cracked open, and then a dazzling golden light could be seen. Then she stretched out her white and tender little hand and took out a fiery red elemental crystal stone. Seeing this scene, Soren's pupils shrank slightly. The other party had mastered the dimensional storage spell. It seemed that her spell-casting level was not low. The metal dragons had an advantage in spell-casting, and the most powerful gold dragon was even famous for being a scholar. Note: gold dragons have long whiskers on their faces, and they look very knowledgeable. Elemental crystal stone, fire. When he saw the fiery red elemental crystal stone, Soren's expression immediately changed. However, the little lowly standing in front of him smiled and put it away. She tilted her head and looked at Soren in front of her and said in a clear voice, "You want it? Even if you want it, I won't give it to you. It's mine. Everything on this mountain is mine, including the nearby desert. Now you're mine too." The little lowly laughed with an insufferably arrogant face. She was clearly so cute, but her expression was so infuriating. It made people feel like she was a silly Chunibu child who needed to be properly educated by an adult. However, Soren was not so relaxed. His expression was even a little nervous. His whole body was tense and slightly bent, ready to fight at any time. Yes. The little lowly in front of him laughed arrogantly, and then her eyes fell on Soren. She said with a playful expression, "I'm going to take you back now. Are you going to resist? Resist? Or resist?" Speechless. When Soren heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched. He slowly held the hilt of his sword and said in a deep voice, "Do I have a choice?" The atmosphere of battle was about to be triggered. The little lowly tilted her head and chuckled, then said in a clear voice, "Of course not. It's not easy for me to catch a toy. Of course I have to play with it. No matter what kind of dragon it was. Whether it was good or evil, there was always one thing that was very annoying about dragons. That was, they were extremely arrogant and self-righteous. Basically, they never considered the thoughts of other creatures. They acted completely according to their own preferences, so if you wanted them to talk to you properly, you had to show them your muscles first. Even if it was a good dragon, if you didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't take you seriously. Hold human. The battle broke out in an instant. The cute little lowly in front of him instantly flew up, raised her white little hand and pointed at Soren in front of her. There was no room to dodge. At such a distance, Soren was hit in an instant, and then a row of data appeared. Spell hit. You've been affected by the brass dragons. Hold human, spell. Mandatory judgment immunity. Test of fortitude passed. Test of will passed. You're completely immune to the hold effect of this spell. It was completely useless. Soren's tenacity and willpower were not to be trifled with after practicing his internal strength for so long. It was not so easy for this kind of spell that wanted to knock people down in an instant to take effect on him. Shang. The cold light of the sword appeared. Even if it was a cute little lowly in front of him, Soren didn't have the slightest intention to be merciful. Haste shoes activated. Soren's figure flew out in an instant and slashed at the opponent's head without any mercy. Advanced spell armor. The little lowly in front of him looked a little surprised. She gently waved her little hand and opened an energy shield. Transforming into a human meant losing the natural advantage of a dragon's physical ability. How could Soren not seize the opportunity to close the distance? Arcane Missile *5. The overwhelming arcane missile shot out wildly. Facing the enemy in front of him, Soren didn't hold back at all and instantly activated the spell from his memory. When a dragon transformed into a human, under normal circumstances, the dragon's magic resistance would also be lost. The little lowly's expression changed from surprise to surprise. She clapped her little hands and said, "You can even cast spells. This is great. Looks like you'll be more durable. You should be a very fun guy." She didn't even look at the arcane missile that filled the sky and let them fall on her body. The next moment, Soren's eyes almost popped out. He murmured, "This is impossible. How can a human have such high magic resistance?" And scathed. It was as if the arcane missile never appeared at all. Chapter 421. Spell Resistance. It was an ability that was difficult to obtain through conventional means. Among all the known professions, the one with the highest spell resistance should be the monk. Legendary monks had an incredible spell resistance. They could stand in place and let a spellcaster with a profession level of 15 or below use up all their spell slots. Basically, as long as a spellcaster's profession level of 15 or below, it was impossible to threaten a legendary monk. This was because in front of the legendary monk's spell resistance, Many spells could not even be resisted, and the effect of all elemental damage was so low that it could be ignored. This was an ability that was higher than any elemental resistance and had an effect on all spells. To a certain extent. This was also the foundation of the monk's cultivation. It was precisely because of the qualitative change that they were immune to any ordinary weapon damage. Soren had no spell resistance. Basically, most rogues did not have spell resistance. Elemental resistance could be obtained through training, but spell resistance was often innate. The monk's spell resistance was accumulated little by little in their daily practice. If others wanted to obtain spell resistance, they could only rely on legendary equipment or advance to the realm of transcendence. Saint form. It was basically impossible for spells below the third circle to threaten a saint in the form of a god. Dragons. They were creatures that were born with spell resistance. And the dragon's spell resistance was very high. Many times it could directly make them immune to some low-level spells. Even high-level spells may not be able to pass through their spell resistance. There was only one way to deal with them. The metamagic ability, spell penetration. If that did not work, then the legendary metamagic ability, legendary spell penetration. If that did not work, then add mana structure, legendary mana structure, and so on. If there was still no way. With the use of spells that reduced the enemy's spell resistance, there was always a way to break the enemy's spell resistance. Unfortunately, at present Soren could not do it. In fact, what puzzled him was that he had not encountered a dragon that transformed into a human in the past. In his memory, once a dragon transformed into another creature, its spell resistance would disappear. Because this transformation was equivalent to temporarily transforming oneself into a human, and humans were creatures that were born with no spell resistance. Hee hee. The little loli waved her little white hand nonchalantly and giggled. You're scared silly just like that? This kind of spell can't threaten me. Do you have any more powerful spells? Let's try it again. Soren's pupils shrank. In the next moment he pulled away and began to rapidly cast spells. Brute Strength. Maximum Spell. Cat's Grace, Extreme Spell. Melf's Minute Meteor, Extreme Spell. The legendary curved sword Icing Death disappeared in Soren's palm, and two dazzling flames were ignited. Soren's figure landed on the stone pillar of the altar. The multiple buffs greatly increased his combat power. Dazzling flames danced. The little loli's expression finally changed. She stared at the minute meteor flame in Soren's palm with a hint of panic. She then stuck out her little tongue and licked her lips. She seemed to be a little excited as she said, "Oh, I think I've gone overboard. I didn't expect you to know this spell. Tisk tisk hey. What are you going to do? Do you want to slay a dragon? I'm so cute. Do you really have the heart to do it?" She was clearly showing her weakness, but the expression on her face was still the same as before. Wah! The little loli suddenly laughed excitedly. Her figure was strangely suspended in midair. There was an evil smile on the corner of her mouth. She provoked, "Come on, weak human. Even if you know this kind of spell, you may not be able to defeat me. I'm the princess of the Brash Dragon Kingdom." The Brash Dragon Kingdom. Dragon Island? Soren seemed to have caught something for a moment, but there was no time for him to think. The little loli in front of him suddenly disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already above Soren. Dragon's Breath. A scene that completely subverted Soren's previous knowledge happened. The brash dragon in front of him could actually use the dragon's ability in human form. She took a deep breath and her little chest was bulging. Her mouth and cheeks were bulging high. When she opened her mouth and spat at Soren, a terrible dragon's breath fell from the sky. Raging fire spewed out. This seemingly petite body actually spat out a terrible dragon's breath that was comparable to an adult red dragon's breath. In an instant, it covered Soren's figure. Shadow Leap. Evade sight. Soren's figure fell under the reflection of the stone pillar on the altar, and then disappeared without a trace in the distorted shadow. The little loli stopped spitting out the terrible dragon's breath. She tilted her head and looked down. She raised her hand and touched her light golden hair. She had an expression of a cat playing with a mouse. She said excitedly, "Are you hiding? I'm very good at hide and seek." "Where are you? Let me see. Where are you hiding?" A strange shadow appeared. Soren's figure appeared in the shadow of a rock on the top of the mountain. He leaped up in an instant, and the burning micrometeor in his palm instantly hit the little loli in front of him. Boom. There was a violent explosion. The terrible penetrating power of Melf's micrometeor destroyed the energy shield on her body in an instant, and at the same time, there was a violent explosion on her body. A petite figure was sent flying backward. But soon she stabilized her figure, but the beautiful lace princess dress was a little tattered, revealing a white and delicate thigh. There were scorched marks. Soren's spell had obviously broken through her magic resistance. But the next moment something strange happened. The little lowly's scorched skin quickly recovered after being hit by the spell, and she returned to her white and delicate appearance, as if she had not received any damage at all. Damn it! Soren's face changed slightly, and he disappeared in an instant. The dragon's regeneration ability is also preserved. What kind of monster was this? In the case of transforming into a human, she could still retain the ability of the dragon form. Not only could she use dragon breath, but she also had the regeneration ability of the dragon body. Well, this was definitely some kind of legendary transformation spell that he did not know about. Woo woo woo. The little lowly covered her cute face as if she was crying, but there were no tears in her eyes. Instead, there was a competitive spirit like a child who had found some kind of interesting game. She pretended to cry for a while, then said with a small mouth, "You actually ruined my favorite dress. I only have this one dress. I'm angry. Now I'm serious." Buzz. Suddenly, a gust of wind escaped from the air. Dragon wing form. A pair of huge dragon wings appeared behind the little lowly. Her body was still in human form, but there was a pair of huge brass dragon wings behind her. She looked a bit similar to the Duke of Red Dragon's wife that Soren had seen before. Therefore, when the Duke of Red Dragon's wife transformed, a pair of huge red dragon wings also appeared behind her. However, the dragon wings of the little lowly in front of him were bigger and more threatening, just like the wings of a real dragon. Flying sand and stones. As the huge dragon wings flapped, a terrible wind swept out, and the sand in front of her was immediately blown away. Soren's trace was exposed in the wind. Even if he was still invisible, there was no way to hide his general outline from others. After all, the stealth of a rogue was not omnipotent. Being invisible to the naked eye did not mean that there was no other way to find him. Found it? There was a hint of excitement in the little lowly's eyes. Her petite body swooped down with the huge dragon wings and she shouted, "This time I'm serious. Please don't die like this." Dragon wing strike. A terrible power broke out in an instant. The huge dragon wings swept down with unparalleled force. The most threatening move of a pure-blooded dragon, the damage caused by the dragon wing strike was enough to move any profession. Chapter 422. The howling wind swept over. Facing the dragon wing attack launched by the little lowly in front of him, Soren's expression was not as panicked as before. He rolled back into the shadows and disappeared without a trace. No profession could withstand the attack of a dragon's wing. Even a wizard with a legendary force field or a barbarian with a legendary berserk would find it difficult to withstand the attack of a dragon's wing. However, it did not mean that he could not dodge it. Soren's shadow jump and shadow jump were not difficult to dodge the attack of the dragon's wing. Shadow jump. The terrible dragon wing attack swept across the entire altar. The little lowly's chest was slightly undulating, and her breathing was slightly rapid. This kind of attack was also a great burden for a dragon. Huh. The little lowly's figure rose into the air, tilted her head and looked down and whispered, "Hiding again? What good things do you have on you? I can't even force you to show up." Anti-detection cloak. Although there was no way to let Soren avoid the effect caused by the AoE attack, it made him invisible to the naked eye. The terrain was a bit unfavorable for him. If it were not for the fact that the desert area was too easy to reveal, Soren would have a greater advantage in the battle. Hee. The little lowly carefully looked around, and there seemed to be an energy shield on her body. She thought for a moment, then took a deep breath again and her little cheeks puffed up. Dragon breath? Didn't the giant dragon's breath need time to recover? How can she use dragon breath twice in a row? Dragon breath, sleeping gas. A strange breath came out of the little lowly's mouth, and then covered a large area in an instant. Two types of dragon breath. Adult dragons with excellent talents could master two different types of dragon breath. One was elemental dragon breath, and the other was gas dragon breath. For example, the silver dragon could spit out ice dragon breath and paralyzing gas dragon breath. The range of the gas was quite large. Soren was almost instantly affected, and at the same time, a row of data appeared in front of him. "You have been attacked by dragon breath. You have been attacked by dragon breath, sleeping gas." Test of compulsory immunity triggered. Test of fortitude passed. Test of willpower passed. You're completely immune to the dragon breath. It was ineffective. Soren's hard work in training his Nigong to increase his immunity finally paid off one day. He was now immune to the effects of the dragon's breath of deep sleep. The little loli gasped in midair and muttered, "Is it still useless? To my surprise, this guy is actually quite strong." Shadow leap. A distorted figure appeared on her left side. Soren's figure suddenly soared into the air, and the minute meteor flame in his palm attacked her like a violent storm. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. In the face of this little loli whose strange methods completely overturned his previous attempts, he could only passively wait for her to exhaust a portion of her strength before counterattacking. Rumble. A violent explosion was heard. The powerful penetrating ability of Melf's minute meteor flame successfully broke through the energy shield. However, in the case of the dragon wing form, the little loli immediately wrapped her petite body with her huge dragon wings as soon as she saw that the situation was not right. In this way, almost all the attacks fell on the huge brass-colored dragon wings. In fact, her body suffered almost no damage. Evade sight. Shadow leap. Soren's figure instantly landed, and then immediately appeared under the shadow of the little loli's huge dragon wings. His whole body was like a taut bow. He suddenly jumped into the air and directly stabbed the enemy in front of him from below. The huge dragon wings spread open slightly. The petite body appeared, and some of the broken lace princess dress fluttered in the wind. Soren soared from below, and his curved sword drew a cold light. After the tip of the sword touched the tip of the opponent's foot, Soren suddenly turned around and put away his sword. The tip of his foot tapped on the huge dragon wings, and then slowly landed like a goose. Ah! When the tip of the sword touched the bottom of her foot, the little loli's whole body trembled violently, but the pain that followed did not appear. Soren's control of his strength was quite subtle. He only touched her lightly, and her skin was not even scratched. The opponent did not want to hurt her. Yes. Soren did not intend to hurt her, and he did not have absolute confidence in defeating her. Since she could have dragon wings in the state of transformation, and retain the dragon's strong recovery ability, then it was very likely that she also had the terrifying defensive ability of a dragon. If this was the case, Soren's attack would at most slightly hurt her. On the contrary, if she was angered and transformed into a dragon, Soren's chances of winning would be greatly reduced. This little girl's strength was probably not low. She might be a brass dragon with a monster level of 25 or above. A gust of wind blew. The little loli's figure flew down from midair, and then directly came to Soren's side. Her little face was red, and her little hand covered the corner of her dress. Her expression was a little shy and angry. "What did you just see?" "What did I see?" Soren heard this and frowned. "I was fighting with you just now, what else could I see?" His mind was slightly distracted. Soren subconsciously recalled the scene just now, and instantly realized that he really did see something. Damn it. It can't be. Seeing Soren's expression, the little loli's face suddenly flushed red, and then she stared at him with dissatisfaction. Her little face also had an angry expression. Soren's expression was a little helpless. He quietly took half a step back and muttered, "What a surprise. Besides, isn't it the same if you fly around naked in the sky all day long in your dragon form?" The little loli glared at him as if she was so angry that she wanted to bite him. She really did grind her teeth, but in the end she held it in. Her little face was red as she said, You're the one who flies around naked." The biological structure of a dragon. Although Soren had slain a dragon a few times, he really didn't study it in detail. However, in a battle situation he really didn't find any obvious weaknesses on the dragon's body. It was as if most of the dragon's body was covered by dragon scales. Thinking about it this way, it didn't really count as flying around naked. But Soren thought about it and looked at the little loli in front of him. His expression suddenly became a little strange, and he secretly said to himself, "You were definitely flying around naked just now." Of course he didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise he might really have to fight with her. The little loli stood in place and stared at him, and then the huge dragon wings gradually disappeared. She raised her white little hand and tidied up her tattered clothes, then she stared at him with dissatisfaction and said in a crisp voice, "Let's go. Come back with me." Soren's expression suddenly became hesitant. The other party's words made him a little uncertain. The little loli turned around and looked at him. A fiery red elemental stone appeared in her palm. She gently weighed it in her palm and said proudly, "Don't you want this thing? I was just playing with you just now. If I really transformed into my dragon form, you might not be able to beat me. If you want it, then come back with me first. This thing doesn't seem to be very useful to me, but it's still my collection. If you want it, then you have to give me something in return." Speaking of this, the little loli couldn't help but squint her beautiful big eyes. She looked up and down at Soren as if she was looking for treasures on him. A leopard can't change its spots. Soren was very clear about the character of a dragon. But the other party didn't seem to have much hostility. Soren hesitated for a moment, then gently nodded and said, "Okay." This little girl wasn't simple. Soren suspected that she came from the Dragon Island, but the Dragon Island in the material plane didn't have a kingdom. Country of the Brass Dragons. Such a name didn't seem to exist in the material plane. In the entire multiverse, there was only one place that could be called the Country of the Dragons. The plane that place was located in wasn't simple. Legend had it that the Time Dragon, who was just a baby dragon, had a challenge difficulty of 24/7. It lived in that plane. Chapter 423. Power. The unprecedented power gradually merged into his body. Soren stood motionless and his figure seemed to become hazy. The shadows around him seemed to cover him, and the picture of the whole space seemed to be a little distorted. The power of the shadows permeated the space, and the distorted shadows rushed to Soren's body like a tide, making his whole person seem to be isolated in another space. He seemed to be just a shadow, and his real body was no longer in the material plane, but in another world. So everything gradually disappeared, and Soren's figure returned to its original appearance. A large number of data appeared. The Shadow Dancer profession has leveled up to level 7. Received 32 DX 26 plus INT 22 to 10, *0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 14, profession HP 8 plus, Constitution 22 to 10, *0. 5. You've received 1 free attribute point. The Shadow Dancer profession has leveled up to level 8. Received 32 DX 26 plus INT 22 to 10, *0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 14, profession HP 8 plus, Constitution 22 to 10, *0. 5. You've received 1 talent point. Advanced to Legendary. You've received 1 extra talent point. The total profession level of the rogue has been raised to 15. You've automatically mastered the ability, Shadow Control. The profession level of the Shadow Dancer has been raised to level 7. You've automatically mastered the ability, Flexible Mind. Break through the critical point. The ability Danger Sense has been raised to the ability, Danger Sense. Break through the critical point. The ability, Reflex Evasion, has been raised to the ability, Reflex Evasion. He finally entered the realm of Legendary. Soren slowly opened his eyes and looked at the huge spider corpse in front of him, then turned around and looked behind him. The little loli tilted her head and sat on a rock looking at him. Her expression seemed to be a little surprised, but only a little surprised. When she saw Soren turn around and look at her, she couldn't help but smile and said in a crisp voice, "Congratulations. It seems that you've advanced to Legendary. But it's a bit troublesome for you humans to advance to Legendary. Unlike us dragons, we just need to fill our stomachs and have a good night's sleep. Dragons? The difference between the two species was too great. The only species that could sleep all the way to the Legendary realm was the dragons. Soren's Slaughter EXP had already reached a critical point. After killing the venomous spider in front of him, he finally had enough Slaughter EXP to advance to Legendary. So he did not hesitate to choose to advance directly. A row of data appeared again. Advance to Legend. You have obtained partial information about the Legendary ability, Shadow Domain. You have obtained partial information about the Legendary ability, Shadow Step. Advancing into the Legendary realm did not mean that one could directly master Legendary level abilities. Many Legendary level abilities required a lot of time to train. However, Soren had an obvious advantage after entering the Legendary realm. He could directly use the ability points he obtained to upgrade his Legendary level abilities. This was also the reason why he had been holding back until now. From now on, every talent point would become extremely precious because the talent points obtained after entering the Legendary realm could directly strengthen the Legendary ability. Note: Ability points obtained by the wizard profession cannot be used to upgrade the rogue profession. This was the second time he received information about Shadow Realm. Soren now only needed to get the last information about Shadow Realm, and he could directly master this legendary level ability. The quantitative change finally led to a qualitative change. At the moment when Soren broke into the legendary realm, the rogue's combat ability had been comprehensively improved. However, because he was a wizard, some of the rogue's legendary level abilities could not be mastered. Note, this is also the reason why there were only 2 information about Shadow Realm. The improvement after advancing into the legendary realm was amazing. In addition to the new abilities, Soren's original abilities were also strengthened. Shadow Jump, 100 meters, Shadow Jump, 200 meters. Shadow Jump, 1 time, Shadow Jump, 2 times. Intuition Evasion, proficient in Intuition Evasion. Reflex Evasion, proficient in Reflex Evasion. Soren had been accumulating evasion abilities for a long time. The accumulation of battle after battle finally exploded at the moment he advanced into the legendary realm. The 2 evasion abilities he mastered were upgraded at the same time. Proficient in Intuition Evasion, supernatural ability. From now on, you have an amazing intuition and prediction ability for any possible attack. It will be difficult for other rogues to sneak attack you, unless the local rogue's profession level is more than 4 levels higher than yours. Otherwise, you will easily see through their intentions and ignore the enemy's sneak attack. Note, this ability is effective for sneak attacks of any profession. Proficient in Intuition Evasion. As long as he had this ability, Soren could basically ignore other people's sneak attacks from now on. Only legendary rogues with a profession level of 25 or above could sneak attack Soren. As for other professions, it was basically impossible to sneak attack Soren. Note, this ability is often used to replace Sixth Sense. Proficient in Reflex Evasion, supernatural ability. From now on, your reflex ability will become more refined. You can perform a difficult reflex evasion test for any attack aimed at you. As long as you pass the reflex test, the damage you receive will be greatly reduced, including AoE spell attacks. You can rely on your amazing reflex ability to avoid most of the damage. Note, after dodging AoE spells, you will receive at most half of the damage. Proficient in Reflex Evasion. The specialty of a rogue was also a life-saving ability to avoid being directly killed by a wizard's AoE spells. As long as he mastered this ability, he could perform a reflex evasion test for AoE spells. With Soren's current basic attributes, it was not difficult to avoid the core area of the attack. From now on, whether it was Fireball or Ice Storm, even if Soren was directly hit by it, the damage he received would be greatly reduced. And these 2 evasion abilities were stacked, so the probability of physical attacks hitting Soren was also very low. Speaking of evasion, here it was necessary to count Soren's current abilities that increased evasion. They were Flexible Movement, Roll Evasion, Proficient in Reflex Evasion, and Proficient in Intuition Evasion. A total of 4 evasion abilities. Finally, it was the rogue's innate ability, Flexible Mind. Flexible Mind, supernatural ability. From now on, if you are affected by the effects of charm, confusion, or illusion spells, you will have an additional chance to pass the test of immunity. Even if you fail the first test of immunity, you will not be affected by the effect of the spell because your flexible mind has produced a supernatural power that allows you to make a second test of immunity. If you fail the second test of immunity, you will not be immune to the effect of the spell. Ultimate Enhancement. Soren, who originally had an innate advantage in charm and control spells, could now be said to be basically immune to such spells. Even a legendary wizard might not be able to charm and confuse him. From now on, Soren could basically ignore the effects of confusion and misdirection spells. It's almost done. Soren looked at his own data page and said to himself, my evasion ability has been stacked to the limit, and it can only be a legendary ability. It's enough to be immune to charm and confusion spells. Basically, I don't have to worry about being controlled by the enemy. 2 expertise points. Soren was a little hesitant about the 2 expertise points obtained from advancing into the legendary realm. Legendary ability. Most of the legendary abilities had prerequisites, including basic attributes, mastery of prerequisites, mastery of basic abilities, and so on. If he wanted to get the ability, legendary dual wielding, it was basically impossible to get the ability, dual wielding. As Soren had just advanced into the legendary realm, some of his abilities had not been completed yet, so the number of legendary abilities he could master was relatively limited. The most eye-catching legendary ability. It was actually not his own ability, but the legendary ability, Epic Sturdy, of the warrior class. Damn. Because of the importance of survival, Soren's constitution had always been not low. Now he directly obtained the prerequisite to master the legendary ability, Epic Sturdy. At present, the legendary abilities he could choose from were, Epic Sturdy, legendary ability. Your constitution has advanced beyond the realm of mortals. From now on, you can further strengthen your body, making yourself half as strong as a dragon. Your HP will be greatly increased, and most attacks will not be able to trigger the judgment of death. This ability can be strengthened up to 10 times, and each increase will increase your HP by 30 points. Note, prerequisites are 20 constitution and the sturdy ability. Maximum HP increase is 300 points. A top-notch tank ability. Increasing his HP to the limit was even more abnormal than the Saints. Unfortunately, Soren's requirements for this legendary ability were very low. Legendary Evasion, legendary ability. Your evasion ability has been transformed into an instinct. Even if you don't discover the enemy's presence, your body's instinct is enough to dodge the enemy's attack. From now on, any physical attack from the enemy, you will be able to dodge at least one attack. This ability can be triggered at most once per minute. This ability is a passive ability. Note, prerequisites are 25 agility, agile movement, reflex evasion, instinct evasion, roll evasion. Legendary evasion. From now on, it would not be so easy for any physical attack to hit Soren. The evasion ability of a legendary rogue was above most professions. About this legendary ability, someone had tested it before. A legendary monk, a legendary barbarian, and a legendary ranger. The three of them attacked at the same time. The damage they caused should have hit the target every minute, but it was strangely dodged by the opponent instinctively. That was to say, if a profession could only effectively hit the target once per minute, then no matter how long they fought, they would not be able to cause any damage to the target. Legendary evasion stacked with any evasion type ability. This was the last legendary ability to be activated. Legendary combat skills, legendary ability. From now on, your combat skills have reached the peak, and fighting has become an instinct for you. Any attack you identify will gain an additional legendary bonus of 1 point. Your combat instinct allows you to more easily exert your peak strength. This ability is a prerequisite for other legendary abilities. Note, no prerequisites. The only legendary ability with no prerequisites. But it was a prerequisite for insight into weakness. To master the legendary ability, insight into weakness, one must first master the ability of legendary combat skills. There were many kinds of legendary abilities. Soren only triggered a few of them because of his focus. There was no doubt that he chose legendary evasion. Soren was also determined to get insight into weakness, so his choice was basically confirmed. Legendary evasion and legendary combat skills. Note, the legendary data will be sorted out and posted in the public chapter after a while. There is one more update today. Chapter 424. Spider Forest. Soren walked in front to explore the way, and behind him was a lively little Lolita. In fact, Soren still didn't understand why this little Loli would suddenly decide to go on an adventure with him after listening to his ridiculous stories about how he poisoned teenagers and pretended to be pretentious dragons for a whole night. Fog. Dragons should be very lazy creatures, right? In Soren's memory, dragons spent most of their time sleeping. He had also seen some good dragons. Although they would deal with other intelligent creatures, he had never heard of them going on an adventure together. The little Lolita in front of him didn't know what was wrong with her. She actually said that she wanted to go on an adventure with him to see interesting things. And she also said that if Soren didn't agree, she would not give him the elemental stone, fire, and she planned to eat it in one bite. Note, she really took a bite at that time. It was said before. Brass dragons could eat almost anything and most of them could be digested. There was no doubt. If the little Lolita in front of him really ate the elemental stone, she might really be able to digest it completely. Finally, Soren could only helplessly take her with him, and he believed that the sentence, since ancient times, chaos has always produced funny people, was correct. Shoo. Soren, who was exploring the way in front, suddenly stopped. He turned around and made a gesture to the little Lolita who was humming and jumping behind him, and said in a deep voice, There's someone in front. Don't make a sound. After advancing to legendary, Soren's abilities in all aspects had been improved a lot. Since there was a Lolita dragon who wanted to go on an adventure with him, he planned to get the last elemental stone as well. In this way he didn't have to trouble Gloria. Now that Soren was not in the Outer Islands, he could only feel at ease if Gloria was in Mordor City. The Lolita dragon behind him was definitely at the legendary level. With her, it would not be difficult to get the last elemental stone, Wind. Maybe he could use her power to defeat the last 4 elemental elders. Hearing this, the little Loli immediately quieted down and tiptoed closer to Soren. She even climbed onto his back and whispered into his ear, "Who is it? Is there anyone nearby? Why didn't I notice it?" His ears were itchy. Soren turned around and glared at her, but when he saw the little Loli's smiling face, he sighed and said softly, "It should be an elf." There was a scouting team nearby. They seemed to be quite skilled. The spider forest was close to the elf kingdom. Soren didn't come all the way from the desert just for sightseeing. In fact, anyone with a bit of intelligence would be able to guess where the spider forest led to based on its name. That was right. The Underdark. Many of the spiders here were the offspring of the Queen of Spiders, Loltha's pets. For a long time, the battle between the surface elves and the underground drows had never stopped. The spider forest was the front line of the battle and also a passage connecting to the Underdark. The last elemental crystal stone was in the Underdark. It was also the elemental crystal stone that he knew the best because Soren had been active in the Underdark for a long time. Are we going to the underground? The little Loli lay on Soren's back. Her beautiful big eyes were eager to move. She said excitedly, "I haven't been to the underground yet. Is there anything fun down there?" The Underdark. That was not something fun. Soren grabbed the little Loli from his back and said in a deep voice, "Be quiet. Let's find a way to sneak in. Don't get involved in the battle between the surface elves and the drows." The spider forest was very dense. 2 silhouettes approached stealthily. Although the little Loli was a giant dragon, her stealth ability was unexpectedly not low when she transformed into a human. Soren was quite familiar with this place because the spider forest was a leveling ground for adventurers with a profession level of 5 to 10. There were many poisonous spiders here, all of which were the offspring of the Queen of Spiders, Loltha's pets. The speed of their reproduction was a headache for many nearby races. Poisonous spiders, phase spiders, fire spiders, etc. There was a small path here that could lead to the Underdark. Soren planned to take the little Loli dragon into the underground world from there and see if a certain rumor had happened. Blood. The ground was full of blood. Accompanied by the sound of blood dripping, a burly barbarian with wounds all over his body knelt on the ground. His breath was very weak. Hideous wounds were all over his body. Many of them looked like marks left by sharp claws. Even with the strong physique of a barbarian, he was gradually approaching the edge of death. Hee hee. A strange and gloomy laughter sounded. The demigod vampire, who was wearing a dark red noble suit, slowly appeared. He looked at the body of a beautiful woman at his feet, lifted his foot and stepped on the beautiful head. He said playfully, "Just with your group of trash. You want to join forces to defeat me? You're overestimating yourselves. Today I'll let you know the difference between a mortal and a god. I'm God. I'm God." A terrible force spread. The blood on the ground all moved like living creatures. The barbarian kneeling on the ground trembled. Facing the approaching demigod vampire, he suddenly said, Don't kill me. I never thought of competing with you for the power of the Dread Lord. Don't kill me. I can tell you where the first deity is." "The first deity?" The vampire Reinhardt stopped and asked with a slight frown, "Where?" He had been looking for that person for a long time. Unfortunately, there had been no clues. It was as if the other party had completely disappeared. Soren. The barbarian's face was full of fear and his voice trembled. "The beheader, Soren. He is the first deity. You should have heard of him. The pirate king of the south coast. If it wasn't for the power of the Dread Lord, he wouldn't have been able to unify the south coast so quickly." "Pirate king? The beheader, Soren?" The demigod vampire's face showed a contemptuous smile and slowly said, "So it's him. He's actually fighting for that pathetic power among the mortals. It seems that I've overestimated him." Speaking of this, his scarlet pupils looked at the barbarian in front of him. "No. Don't kill me." The barbarian's body slowly fell. The demigod vampire looked around with a cold expression and ordered, "Deal with this place. Don't leave any traces. Recently, the group of paladins has been really annoying. Damn paladins. They were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. After killing a group, another group would appear immediately. Were they really not afraid of death? Some other vampire servants appeared and quickly began to clean up the blood nearby. The demigod vampire looked up in the direction of the sea and murmured, "The south coast? Recently, the Church of Riches has been very hostile to me, but I still have to kill him as soon as possible." Soren. He shouldn't be a troublesome opponent, right? Patter. There was a slight sound of something falling to the ground. The hazy figure of the Hellpemer appeared behind the demigod vampire. He frowned and glanced at the blood on the ground. He slowly said, "Reinhardt, let's talk about that later. Important news has been set." The demigod vampire turned around when he heard the words. He smiled and looked at the Hellpemer. He opened his hand as if to hug the other party, but the Hellpemer avoided him. "What news has been set?" The Hellpemer pulled away a little. As a depraved and evil dark creature, vampires had certain habits. Ever since he learned something about them, he had been reluctant to get too close to Reinhardt. The Hellpemer raised his hand and threw a file over, then said, "The god of rogues and half-elves has appeared. He's in the Underdark. Someone saw his miracles in the Underdark. This is an important opportunity for us." "God?" There was a hint of excitement on the demigod vampire's face. There was a sickly blush on his handsome face. He murmured, "A saint? I can finally taste the blood of a god." Chapter 425. Darkness. This was the strongest feeling anyone had when they entered the Underdark from the surface world. The entire narrow passage was pitch black, and the ground was slightly slippery due to the water stains. Dark green moss grew on the walls on both sides. Soren's night vision allowed him to easily see the surroundings, but the little lowly behind him was a little troublesome. Dragons had better vision than humans, but it was very limited when it came to dark environments. At most, they could reach the level of night vision, and it was very inconvenient for them to move in complete darkness. The Underdark was not completely dark. In fact, most of the areas in the Underdark were in the state of night vision. This was because there would be more or less light diffusing. It could be from fluorescent plants or from other sources of light. The specific difference could be understood as a night with no moon or stars. In this case, the range of human vision would be reduced to less than 3 meters. Many places in the Underdark were like this, so adventurers from the surface had to prepare torches or find some rare items that could enhance their night vision. This was not difficult for wizards. A normal night vision helmet cost around 300 to 500 Kindler coins. Those who had the ability to venture into the Underdark would not be short of money. "Oh, it's so dark." The little lowly was lying on Soren's back. She moved her head close to his ear and whispered, "Are we not underground yet? Can't I cast Illuminate permanently?" "What? Are you planning to be a target in the Underdark?" "No." Soren refused without hesitation and said in a deep voice, "About 1,000 meters down, there will be fluorescent moss. You will be able to see things then." "What?" In the Underdark, a light source was a living target. Soren knew too well how much trouble it would cause if he lit a light source. Hooked horrors, giant lizards, mind flayers and so on. These creatures in the Underdark were very sensitive to light. Recklessly using light was the same as starting the farming mode that adventurers jokingly called. As they went deeper into the underworld, some stalactites began to appear above Soren's head. He did not know where the underground water source was, but he could hear the dripping sound of it. In the Underdark, any place near a water source was a battle zone. There were bound to be monsters that lived underground nearby. "Oh, there seems to be a swamp nearby." The little lowly leaned on Soren's shoulder and seemed to dislike the smell. She wrinkled her nose and said, "I could feel the wet smell from afar, and there was also a rotten smell. No wonder those ugly and dirty black dragons like to stay underground." In the underground swamp. Basically, places with swamps in the Underdark would have very obvious light sources. As expected, Soren began to see light. It was dark green moss that emitted a faint fluorescent light. It was a mutated plant that was very common in the Underdark. The other was a mushroom that was a specialty of the Underdark. These two plants were quite tenacious and could even grow near volcanoes. Soren had seen fiery red moss near a volcano in the Underdark. The ground became a little wet. Soren gently put the little lowly down and then made a gesture to keep quiet. In the underground swamp, it was very easy for a kind of creature to exist in such a terrain. Swamp bearmen. Simply put, they were a kind of mutated human that was infected with a virus. They belonged to a branch of the beastmen. For some unknown reason they were bitten by other beastmen, or they were born with the disease of beastmen. In the end, they had the ability to transform into a beast or a beastman in combat. Lulu Mao, who Soren brought back, was a catwoman in the beastmen branch. Looking at Lulu Mao's talent, one could understand the combat power of the beastmen. Most adult beastmen were born between level 5 and level 8. About the beastmen. Soren should be most familiar with werewolves, tigermen, and bearmen. Among them, werewolves infected with the beastmen virus were the most common and could occasionally be encountered in the surface world. The rarer ones were tigermen and bearmen. Most of them lived in very rare areas. As for catwomen like Lulu Mao, they were basically on the verge of extinction. Needless to say, werewolves and tigermen had a natural strength adjustment of plus 16, which meant that as long as they transformed, their strength would directly increase by 16 points. Note, the strength of bearmen in the Underdark fluctuates between 27 to 36. In human form, their strength is not much different from ordinary people. Most of them are between 9 to 14. Even if it was just an adult bearman, their strength after transformation was higher than a strong brown bear. Huge footprints began to appear on the ground. They were about the same size as a brown bear. These mutated bearmen were between humans and beast. The beastmen virus affected their intelligence, making them not much different from savages. Most of them lived in a tribal way. There were rumors that bearmen were the failed product of a droll transformation research experiment in a glorious arcane era, which eventually led to the appearance of the beastmen virus. Unfortunately, no one could prove it. Note, the appearance of the beastmen virus was earlier than the Arcane Empire, and the Arcane Empire also conducted research in this area. Thinking back to when he first met Lulu Mao, he could understand what kind of creatures these bearmen were. At that time she was really wild and untamed. I'll go and see the situation. Soren glanced at the little lowly behind him and whispered, maybe I can find a guide in the bearmen's territory. They like to capture other creatures as slaves and reserve food. Stealth. Soren's figure disappeared into the shadows. In the Underdark he was like a fish in water. He could enter stealth at any time. There were a lot of footprints on the ground. Soren preliminarily judged that there were 3 to 6 bearmen living here. With this scale, even the patrolling drow guards would not easily provoke them. The swamp terrain was a bit troublesome. But fortunately Soren still had spells. As he gradually sneaked in he soon saw a shabby shack. And a huge cage. There were obvious skeletons on the ground, which could be distinguished from drow, grey dwarf, and gnome creatures. There was no bonfire, which meant that the bearmen in front of him were the most primitive creatures that ate raw meat and drank blood. There was no way to communicate with them at all. The beastmen virus could completely destroy the brain and turn them into beasts. Some of them could not even master the ability to transform back into a human for the rest of their lives. In the entire Underdark, there were very few beastmen that could be civilized and intelligent. In this regard, Lulu Mao was a very smart beastman. Strong combat power and very low IQ. This seemed to be more prepared for war. There were some creatures in the cage. Soren saw an injured mutant bugbear, a dying grey dwarf, and a dead hook horror. All of them were very difficult to deal with. But for the bearmen infected with the beastmen virus, they were all just food. Bang! Heavy footsteps could be heard. In Soren's field of vision, a huge monster that weighed more than 1,500 pounds appeared. It looked like a brown bear that walked upright. Its head was that of a bear, but part of its body had the outline of a human. It was very similar to a werewolf after transformation. No matter how one looked at it, their bloodline level was much lower than Lulu Mao's. It also meant that they were more primitive, more wild, and more threatening. A bearman that can't transform back into a human. Soren could determine the state of the enemy at a glance. After the bearmen returned to their territory, their noses twitched and sniffed everywhere, as if they had smelled something. Wild intuition. In front of him was the lowest level of beastmen, the most brutal, vicious, and inhumane. They couldn't be considered intelligent creatures at all. They could only be considered as beasts that walked upright. Bearman, Beastman, Grade 3. Challenge rating 10, monster level 12+, has the ability to transform. Highest and lowest attribute points, 36 and 9, total attribute points, 85 to 100. Special abilities, Sturdy, Violent Strike, Powerful Slam, Rend, Claw, Roar, Transformation, Rage, Bloodthirst, Charge, Wild Intuition. Difficulty, S+. Most of the bearmen were Grade 3 creatures, but if you measured them as an ordinary Grade 3 enemy, it was basically an act of suicide. This was because their difficulty in Grade 3 was as plus. Note: a team of fully armed adventurers with a profession level of 10 has less than a 10% chance of defeating a bearman after exhausting all their items. P.S. There is only one chapter today. Please let Fudo organize his thoughts. Mwah. Chapter 426. I'm preparing for a peak battle, a breakthrough attempt. The foreshadowing that should be buried is almost done. I hope to finish it before the end of the month. Please look forward to the true strength of the Arcane Empire. Poochie. Fresh blood spurted out. The bear shifter let out an angry and painful roar and slapped his back. The huge force set off a gust of wind, and a millstone-sized bluestone was smashed into pieces in an instant. Soren's figure leaped, and his curved sword Icing Death slashed through the gap between the bearshifter's arms again. Accompanied by a cold light, another wound appeared on the bearshifter's body. Tremendous strength, sluggish movements, and a brain that wasn't considered smart. For Soren, who had now advanced into the legendary realm, dealing with this kind of enemy was actually very simple, because it was too difficult for the bearshifter to hit him. If it wasn't for the fact that most of the bearshifter's physique was higher, he was afraid that his initial backstab would have been able to finish off the target. But now the bearshifter's injuries weren't light either. Its chest kept bleeding. Its huge body seemed incomparably ferocious, but every time it attacked, it hit the empty ground. If it was a tiger shifter with a high threat, it might still be able to touch Soren's body, but the bearshifter didn't have much to think about. Plop. A dull sound of something falling to the ground sounded. Soren slowly withdrew his curved sword, and stared at the dead body of the bearshifter on the ground. After losing its vitality, its body gradually shrank, and finally became a human man with thick hair all over his body. His face was very rough, and his appearance was similar to that of a savage. It was only after his death that he turned into a human form. The side effects of the bearshifter disease were very big. If one's innate strength was not enough, it was very likely that they would be like the bearshifter in front of him. They would be an ignorant beast for the rest of their lives, and only death could make them return to their original form. In addition, there was another very dangerous aspect of the bearshifter. Low-level bearshifter like the one in front of him would carry some kind of terrible virus. If one was injured by them, there was about a 10% chance of being infected with the bearshifter disease. At this time, one would have to go through a compulsory test of immunity. Or else, it was possible for them to be infected with the beast virus. After a period of feverish and painful transformation, it was possible for them to transform into beastmen on a certain night of a full moon or at any other time. During the transformation process, there was also a mandatory constitution test. If it failed, it would cause the user to go crazy or even die. Most of the beast viruses were carried by low-level war creatures. Their bodies contained the most primitive virus. If they were the offspring of a beastman such as Lulu, an extremely rare existence, then the beastman virus would transform into their own genetic lineage. Lulu's main body was still in human form. There was no sign of her transformation, so it was very likely that her father or mother was a purebred human. Note 1, on the mutated form of beastmen and the mutation after reproduction, Chapter 6. Note 2, on reproductive isolation and the probability of interracial reproduction of war creatures, Chapter 3, research report on mixed werewolves. Soren wasn't afraid of these viruses. Regardless of whether it was the beast virus or the undead corpse poison, it was impossible for him to be immune to them with his current endurance, vitality, and will. Unless Soren was infected by the virus while he was dead, he could basically ignore them. Come out. Soren slashed open the cage next to him and said to the gray dwarf imprisoned inside, "Where are you from? Are you familiar with the surrounding terrain?" Bang. Just as Soren opened the cage, the bugbear suddenly rushed out and ran out of the swamp without saying a word. It didn't know if it was out of its mind, but it actually thought that it could escape from Soren's hands. What greeted it was a cold flash of a sword. Soren swung his sword and chopped off the bugbear's head. The blood that gushed out splashed onto the gray dwarf's body. The gray dwarf couldn't help but shudder and then stutter, "Your Highness. Your Highness. Don't kill me. I'll tell you everything I know. Please don't kill me. No matter where you want to go, I'll lead the way for you." Light footsteps could be heard. The little loli tiptoed from outside. When she saw the corpse on the ground, she immediately clapped her hands and swaggered over. She pouted and said, "Soren, I'm bored to death. The environment here is so disgusting. Why don't we go out first? As a brass dragon that lived in the desert, she naturally hated the swamp environment. Okay. Soren nodded slightly and put away his sword. He stared coldly at the gray dwarf in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Lead the way. There should be a road that leads to Glex City nearby. Take us there first." The gray dwarf cowered and walked forward. Soren followed behind with an expressionless face. The little loli was still carefree and happy, but she didn't like the environment here. About 1,000 meters away from Soren, a slender masked woman stood in the darkness. Her eyes were slightly shining as if they contained some kind of mysterious power. There seemed to be an invisible force field around her body. Anything that got close to her, including the wind, was isolated. She stared at Soren's position. Her gaze seemed to penetrate through space and directly locked onto Soren's figure. Die. Heavy footsteps sounded. Behind the slender woman, a burly man appeared. He carried a heavy battle axe with one hand. His terrible muscles seemed to contain infinite power. The luster of the adamantine was mixed with some kind of indescribable power. Just a glance could tell that it contained a strong lethality. This was a very terrible barbarian. There was almost no need to guess that his strength was already above the legendary realm. He spoke the ancient common language, a language that was used thousands of years ago. It was a language composed of 36 rune letters. The name was very special. However, if it was converted into the current syllables, it should be possible to call this masked woman Die. The barbarian slowly walked behind her and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" Ah, there was a chuckle. The masked woman turned around and looked at the barbarian. She smiled and said lightly, "I accidentally found a good rogue. He's a very interesting little guy. And he's followed by a brass dragon in human form. Such a combination is quite rare." The barbarian frowned and said in a deep voice, "Don't complicate things. We didn't come out of Sigil City to play this time. This is the first official action of the Godslayer. Our bait has attracted the target. The Queen of Spiders has turned her attention to the bait. To deal with this terrible existence, I believe you should know the consequences of failure. The Queen of Spiders, the supreme existence of the Underdark, the Queen of the Drows, the ruler of the Abyss, a terrible god with great divine power." Dai's expression gradually became serious. She withdrew her gaze and said slowly, "I know what's important. I won't delay business. It's just that this little guy's soul is very special. I've never seen such soul power. Dark, cruel, ruthless. But there's an indescribable light. I even saw the glory of sacrifice. It's a little fascinating." The masked woman smiled a little frivolously, then slowly spread out her palm and said in a cold voice, "War Chess Note 2, Simulation activated. Activate, Arcane War Chess, Scanning Mode." A cluster of pure energy appeared. Then, an invisible energy field spread out in all directions. Psionic energy field activated. Soul scanning activated. Activate terrain simulation. Scan the surrounding 100 kilometers. Thaling 7 took over command of the war chess system. Beginning terrain simulation. Tactical map construction. Scanning the nearby space nodes. Psionic energy field spread. Activate psionic resonance. Synchronized psionic transmission established. Calculating space waymarks. Semi-plane synchronization locked. Simulation of a different dimension teleportation channel. Teleportation node rune. Arcane power armor Note 3, standby. Thaling 6 took over command of space waymarks. Godslayer plan activated. Target, Queen of Spiders, Lolth. Note 1. Sigil City is a very mysterious existence in the entire multiverse. Legend has it that it is an important node of the multiverse and has portals that connect countless planes. The Lady of Pain is the absolute ruler of Sigil City and has terrible power that mortals can't imagine. However, Sigil City has been closed for a long time, and now there are very few existences that can enter Sigil City. Sigil City rejects all gods, and even gods with great divine power can't easily set foot in this place. Note 2. Arcane War Chess is a tactical simulation game that originated from the Arcane Empire. Now this special technology has been lost, and only a few wizard organizations have a partial simulation ability. When Soren was looking for the second elemental stone, the elemental djinn he met mentioned this, war chess. The monsters it summoned at that time simulated the rules of arcane war chess. Note 3. The magic-powered armor was a terrifying war machine during the Arcane Empire and all the previous information. Chapter 427. Soren, who was moving forward, suddenly stopped. His muscles tightened, and his palm held the hilt of icing death in an instant. He was ready to fight at any time. The Lolita dragon next to him was shocked by Soren's action, but in the next moment she quickly disappeared. Her petite figure appeared in mid-air, and her whole body was shrouded in an invisible energy field. The only one who was unaware was the captured Duergar, who was still looking around blankly. Psionic energy field. Soren's expression was very solemn. His perception was raised to the limit, and his telepathy was also paying attention to the surroundings. He slowly said, "There's a psionic warlock casting nearby." The little Lolita dragon's expression was very serious and she whispered, "Legendary." No. It should be above legendary. I felt a terrible power like a psionic storm. The coverage of the psionic force field is quite wide. How is that possible? There can't be such a powerful psionic warlock in the material plane. Both of them were ready to fight at any time. However, there was no abnormal situation nearby, and the sudden burst of psionic force field only existed for a moment. When it calmed down, Soren even suspected that he had just seen an illusion. However, if there was no Lolita dragon next to him, Soren might think that it was an illusion, but now that the Lolita dragon next to him also felt it, it was absolutely impossible that it was an illusion. There was indeed a very powerful psionic warlock casting a spell, and the coverage of the psionic force field was so large that it was a little beyond Soren's imagination. Such a coverage area. According to Soren's past memory, if it was really done by a psionic warlock, then his profession level might be above level 30. A level 30 psionic warlock? How was that possible? Soren had never encountered such an existence during the time of troubles. There were probably only a few creatures in the astral plane that could reach this level. Was it an illusion? The Lolita dragon shook her little head and landed on the ground. She stared at Soren and murmured, "Did you feel it?" "Just now. A very powerful psionic force field." Soren nodded slowly and said in a deep voice, "I felt it. It's impossible for both of us to be hallucinating at the same time. There might really be a psionic warlock nearby. It's best to be careful later." The Lolita dragon nodded her little head gently and said softly, "Could it be a Githyanki? The knowledge in my memory tells me that Githyankis often appear in the Underdark, and there are many powerful psionic warlocks among them." Surprise. Soren looked at the Lolita dragon next to him in surprise and said slowly, "It's possible. Githyankis do appear frequently in the Underdark." It seemed that this Lolita dragon was quite knowledgeable. Most of the time, a dragon's hereditary memory would take a long time. Judging from her current form, she probably hadn't fully awakened all her hereditary memories. This meant that her bloodline was most likely from the Dragon Nation. Githyanki. Damn it. I don't know much about the Underdark before the Avatar Crisis. Is there really a powerful psionic warlock visiting the Underdark from the astral boundary? Which astral boundary traveler would it be? Soren tried his best to search his memory, but unfortunately he could get very little information. When he first came to the Underdark, it was already after the Avatar Crisis. The gap between the two was actually quite big, which was why he needed a guide. The difficulty of the Underdark was much higher than the surface world. Before the Avatar Crisis, only a few adventurers could enter it. About this period of time, a lot of information was just hearsay because not many people could intervene in this level of field at that time. Soren also reincarnated in the river Styx before he became a legend, so there was a partial gap in the information level. Be careful. Soren looked around, motioned the Grey Dwarf to continue moving forward, and said slowly, "Psionic warlocks are not easy to deal with. We have to be ready for battle at any time." The group continued to move forward. But until Soren found the way to the city of the Grey Dwarves, they didn't encounter any abnormalities. Everything just now was like an illusion. They didn't encounter any enemies, nor did they see any traces of psionic warlocks. The psionic force field disappeared. It only existed for a moment and then disappeared completely. The Underdark, the crossing passage. The demigod vampire threw away the body of the drows in his hand, raised his hand and gently wiped the corners of his mouth, and said contemptuously, "This group of dirty and licentious drows. Their blood is as disgusting as feces." At the feet of the Helpheimer was the body of another female drow. He glanced at the demigod vampire coldly and said slowly, "Then why did you bite her?" Reinhardt spat softly as if he still felt a little disgusted. He turned and glanced at the Helpheimer next to him. A frivolous smile appeared on his handsome face and he said lightly, "We are not familiar with this place, so we need a servant to lead the way." A drop of blood slid down. With some kind of evil and depraved power, the body of the drows at his feet suddenly trembled. "Master." A cold and ruthless voice sounded, and the dead drow stood up. Her pupils were gray, and her whole body was like a puppet, humbly kneeling at the feet of the demigod vampire. The demigod vampire smiled slightly, raised his hand and tapped on the forehead of the drows and slowly said, "What a simple thing. Now we can let her lead the way." The god of half-elves and rogues. I can't wait any longer. What should the blood of a god taste like? It must be very wonderful. The Helpheimer looked at him blankly, gently touched the magic flute in his palm and said coldly, "Don't be complacent. This is the territory of the Queen of Spiders. It is not ruled out that she will also notice this prey. This existence is not to be trifled with. Even her avatar is enough to kill us easily." Reinhardt's body trembled and then he seemed calm and said, "It shouldn't be. For the Queen of Spiders, a weak god should not be enough for her to personally take action." The Helpheimer did not speak but continued to walk forward. After a while he said, "Don't forget her greed and brutality. Besides, she may be interested in anything related to elves." The demigod vampire paused for a moment and then said, "But that's a half-elf, and it has nothing to do with the drows." The Helpheimer looked around and then said, "I know. So we'd better pray that we don't meet her. The recent changes in the drows may be because she has passed on some kind of oracle. In addition, I heard that a group of paladins with good strength have also come to the Underdark. I don't know what the purpose of these guys is. What could possibly attract them here in this dark zone that is filled with evil and chaos? Paladins?" The demigod vampire frowned and then said with a disgusted face, "What a group of guys. An unknown place." A towering adept's tower stood on the plains, piercing the clouds. At the top of the wizard tower, there was an astrology platform with countless mysterious and ancient runes engraved on it. At this moment, a figure in a gray robe stood in the center, and his sight seemed to pass through space and looked at the underground world. "It's begun." He gently raised his finger and a metallic luster appeared on his fingertips. As the faint light sprinkled in front of him, his appearance gradually became clear. It had a metallic face and a metallic body. The silver-white metal was like human skin, and it changed slightly with his expression. There was a special device on his chest. It was a clock that could not be described in words. There were countless tiny runes on it, and there were special marks on the 12 notches. It looked like the pattern of the 12 zodiac signs. The clock was still ticking. He looked into the distance and murmured, "I don't have much time left. Maybe the brilliance of the arcane can bloom again. Maybe everything will be buried by time. Only time will tell us the answer. Only time will tell everything. Thank you, Dirk Lena. May you be eternally in time." A space crack leading to the unknown place. In front of this man made entirely of metal, there was a space as bright as the galaxy. In the center of the space there was a dragon sleeping. With its breathing, time and space gradually distorted. Time dragon. There was only one existence in the entire multiverse that could distort time and space like this. Chapter 428. There was a faint smell of sulfur in the air. The environment in the Underdark was very bad. Some places even had underground volcanoes that could erupt at any time. Especially when they were close to the city of the Grey Dwarves, the faint smell of sulfur was even more obvious. The Grey Dwarves inherited the dwarves' usual attitude of seeking death. They liked to build their cities near volcanoes, or directly dig through the ground to draw out the underground magma. In terms of forging skills, the Grey Dwarves' skills were far superior to the surface dwarves because they often encountered blacksmith masters who could forge +3 and +4 weapons. Unfortunately, the materials of the weapons in the Underdark were special. Many of them would become a pile of scrap iron if they were brought to the surface world. The Grey Dwarves were the best source of slaves in the Underdark. They had been ruled by the Mind Flayer for a long time. Although they were now free from the control of the Mind Flayer, there were still a large number of captured Grey Dwarven slaves in the city of the Drows. Slavery was deeply ingrained in this race. Even if they broke free from the control of the Mind Flayer, they were still regarded as a source of slaves by many creatures. In a city of drows, the number of Grey Dwarven slaves may reach 1/10 or 2/10 of the total population. The light dimmed again. Soren heard the sound of flowing spring water. After passing through a towering stone forest, a white mist appeared in front of them. Soren remembered this place. Although the environment in the Underdark was very bad, there was also a good thing. Hot springs. In fact, there were many hot springs in the Underdark that could be developed, and the one in front of them was the largest open-air sulfur hot spring nearby. The drows advocated intrigue, the Grey Dwarves' brains were full of iron lumps, and the mainstream races in the Underdark did not seem to realize the value of hot springs. In the end, a team of adventurers from the surface world carried out a simple development and turned this place into a gathering point for exploring the Underdark. The water here seems good. The Lolita dragon sniffed with her eyes closed. She seemed to like the smell of sulfur. The temperature of the spring water was actually quite high, about 50 degrees, but for a dragon it was negligible. The little Lolita reached out and took a sip of the spring water, then turned around and looked at Soren with wide eyes. She said hopefully, "Soren, can I take a bath here?" There was no sun in the Underdark. Therefore it was easy to lose track of time. Many cities in the Underdark had a light source, which was actually some kind of obelisk that emitted light. Soren roughly calculated the travel time and nodded. "Let's rest here for an hour. I'll go prepare some food." With that, he kicked the Grey Dwarf beside him. Soren turned around and asked in a low voice, "Are the furnaces in Gleck City still lit up?" "Furnace fire?" The Grey Dwarf's expression was a little blank, but he still hurriedly nodded. "The fires in Gleck City have never been extinguished." "Is it still lit up?" Soren fell into deep thought, then nodded and said, "Go set up a campfire and prepare some food. I don't think you're stupid enough to think of running away, right?" The Grey Dwarf quickly nodded. Soren glanced at him and casually tossed a torch over, asking him to take out some dried meat rations. "The fires in Gleck City haven't been extinguished yet." Soren sat down as if he was thinking about something. He murmured, "That means the divine artifact hasn't been completed yet. I don't know how long it will take these Grey Dwarves to make that thing. But it should be before the start of the Avatar crisis, right?" Soren thought about his own matters. After about a while, Lolita Dragon's light figure came from behind. "It's so comfortable." Lolita Dragon used her white little hands to tidy up her pale blonde hair and tied it into a pair of beautiful ponytails. Then she blinked her big eyes and looked at Soren. "Don't you want to take a bath? The water below is so comfortable. Soaking in it makes me feel lazy." Soren shook his head gently. The group stayed in place for a moment, then continued on their way to their destination. Before leaving, Soren couldn't help but look at Gleck City again. There was a divine artifact in this city. Or rather, a divine artifact that was being made. About 10 years ago, the Grey Dwarves of this city discovered a large vein of mithril while they were in the process of mining. This was quite a shocking amount of wealth. If it was leaked out, it might even lead to a crazy attack from the drows. Therefore, the ruler of Gleck City, Greybeard, blocked the news for a while and restricted all the Grey Dwarven craftsmen who knew the truth, not allowing them to leave. Since then, the fires in Gleck City had never been extinguished. Greybeard was using the mithril to forge a powerful equipment. Because they had been enslaved by the Mind Flayer, many Grey Dwarves had a certain level of psionic ability. Greybeard was the best among all the Grey Dwarves. Not only was he a legendary psionic warlock, profession level 21, but he was also a level 5 berserker and level 5 wizard at the same time. Greybeard made a mithril chain armor. It didn't affect his casting at all. Each buckle was engraved with runes, and all of them were personally engraved by him. Soren didn't know the specific attributes of this divine artifact. However, he knew that this mithril chain armor's defensive ability was equivalent to a full body plate armor plus 3. The entire mithril chain armor's buckles were engraved with runes. In addition to its powerful defensive ability, it was also enchanted with a lot of powerful spells. The most important thing was that this mithril chain armor was as light as a feather. It wouldn't interfere with the caster's battle at all. Even a wizard could easily wear it. This was why it was a divine artifact even though it wasn't made by a god. Greybeard wasn't easy to deal with. What was more troublesome was that he was the ruler of Gleck City. He was also a powerful legendary profession. Therefore, even if Soren had some plans for this divine artifact, he didn't have a clear idea. However, there was still some time before the divine artifact was completed. Soren felt that if he could enter the realm of the gods, he might have a chance to get his hands on this divine artifact. As a rogue and a wizard, it wasn't easy for Soren to find a divine artifact that he could use. Greybeard might not be one of the strongest people in the Underdark, but in the entire Underdark, he seemed to be the only one who could reach more than 400 points in both magic equipment forging and alchemy at the same time. As he got closer and closer to his destination, after solving some small problems, Soren finally saw the outline of an altar. It was already very broken. However, there were still powerful energy fluctuations around it. The last elemental stone. Soren's expression couldn't help but be slightly excited. At the same time, he turned around and looked at the Lolita dragon next to him. Chapter 429. The air seemed to be getting heavier. In the dark passage, a tall and burly figure slowly walked out. It was an orc with a strange appearance. Only a small tuft of hair was left standing. It was more than 2 meters tall, and its muscles were filled with terrifying explosive power. Unlike the exaggerated muscles of the barbarians, the orc's muscles were very refined. If one looked carefully, one could see that every muscle on the orc's body was quite powerful. It even contained more explosive power than Sauron's. The Sword Saint has arrived at the target location. The orc looked around with cold eyes, and then an invisible light appeared in its palm. It said directly in its mind, "There are no obstacles at the target location. Do you want to wait here?" Time passed little by little. About a minute or two later, a frivolous female voice sounded slowly, "The Sword Saint is on standby. The bait has entered the reserved area. The praise dog has appeared. Pay attention to the priests of the Queen of Spiders Church. There is no sign of the prey yet." The orc slowly nodded and replied, "The Sword Saint understands. Is the elemental pool fully charged? The elemental fission wave blade can't be charged to the 5th grade of the artifact. I'm not sure if I can break the Queen of Spiders' celestial force field." The frivolous female voice sounded again and said lightly, "Extracting the energy of the half-plane. It is estimated that the energy will reach its peak in 24 hours. The orc nodded again and said, "Understood. The Sword Saint is on standby, waiting for orders." Pada. Light footsteps came from the side of the passage. The Sword Saint, who stood motionless, suddenly turned around and looked at the darkness not far away. The figures of the demigod vampire and the Helphemer appeared in front of him. Shock. Not only was the Sword Saint a little shocked, but the demigod vampire and the Helphemer were also a little shocked. Both sides didn't notice each other in advance. This meant that their hiding ability was not much different. They didn't notice each other until the distance was close enough. The Sword Saint. The demigod vampire just glanced at it, and his expression changed slightly. Telepathy directly echoed in the Helphemer's mind, and he said in a deep voice, "The Sword Saint is above the legendary level." The Helphemer's answer was also very quick, "Hybrid orc. Doesn't seem to be from the material plane. It could be from the astral world." The demigod vampire's face remained unchanged, but his heart was in turmoil. He said solemnly, "Astral Sword Saint?" The Helphemer quietly held the magic flute tightly and replied, "It's possible." The demigod vampire said, "It seems to be very strong." Helphemer, "Stronger than me." The demigod vampire said, "How is that possible? Then wouldn't he be?" The Helphemer replied, "I can't determine his exact strength, but I'm sure he's from the astral world. There's some remnant astral world energy in his body." The demigod vampire said, "Could it be that they were attracted by the god of half-elves and rogues?" Helphemer, "It's possible. It seemed that there weren't many things that could attract such an existence other than the realm of the gods. But the god of rogues and half-elves didn't seem to match his power. Unless he's only interested in the godhood." The demigod vampire said, "Since he's an opponent, why don't we kill him in advance?" Helphemer, "The chances of winning aren't high. Moreover, we haven't even seen any traces of our prey yet, and we've already exchanged blows with an astral sword saint. Don't you think this is a bit of a loss?" The demigod vampire said, "It seems that this battle will be very difficult. Are many powerful people attracted by the godhood?" Helphemer, "I don't know. Let's act according to the circumstances." On the other side, after the orc sword saint found the two figures in front of him, he immediately used telepathy and said, "Unknown targets found. One of them is in the form of a saint, and the other seems to be the legendary Helphemer. Would you like to clear the target as an obstacle?" After a while, in the mind of the orc sword saint, there was a cold voice that sounded like metal rubbing against each other, and it slowly said, "Don't act rashly. It's possible that they are other people attracted by the bait. If the other party is not hostile, let them leave. I have asked Butterfly to include them in the monitoring of the psionic force field. A bait may not be able to attract the prey to attack personally. I am recalculating the battle plan. The target of the saint form is the god of vampire, and it will be listed as the second bait to attract the queen of spiders. The orc sword saint nodded to the demigod vampire not far away and said in his mind, "Sword saint understands." There was a short silence. The demigod vampire glanced at the orc sword saint who nodded slightly at him and said telepathically, "It seems that he has no intention of fighting with us. Helpheimer, that's best. We will leave directly from the side." The demigod vampire, "Are we leaving just like that? The astral sword saint is very rare. Don't you want to test his strength?" Helpheimer, "The sword saint is not testing the enemy, it will only become a battle of life and death. If we fight with him, the outcome will only be in a few seconds. This is not testing the enemy but fighting with his life." The demigod vampire, "That's true. Then let's leave. But it's really a pity. I have never encountered such an enemy. It seems that the recent changes have attracted many strong people traveling in the astral world. Helpheimer, let's go. Such an astral world traveler rarely acts alone, and there may be companions nearby." There was not much contact between the two sides. The demigod vampire and the Helpheimer cautiously left through the side passage, while the orc blade master stood motionless. He waited until the target had completely disappeared before he retracted his gaze. "The target has left." A magnetic female voice sounded, "Understood. The target has been included in the detection range of the psionic power field. 80 kilometers away from the location of the orc sword saint. An expressionless monk stood on a towering stone pillar. His gaze was focused on the darkness in front of him as if he was observing something through the fog. Monk has arrived at the designated location. Monk, stand by." A frivolous female voice sounded, "Stand by. Did you find anything unusual?" The monk replied, "Traces of wax demon have been found. The prey may have appeared, but the target's concealment ability is too high and did not appear in our detection range." Another cold metallic voice sounded, "Thaling number 5 has taken over the detection authority within 50 kilometers. Monk, prepare for battle. After the target appears, immediately clear the other obstacles nearby and ensure that there are no other disturbances near the prey." The monk nodded and said, "Monk understands." 50 kilometers away from the position of the monk, there seemed to be something in the twisted shadows. In front of him was a team of fully armed drows. On the left and right were petrifying lizard knights. Male drow rangers were scattered to protect them. In the middle was a group of female drow priests and spellcasters. Behind what looked like a drow matriarch, there were some terrible monsters with hideous faces. They were the legendary spider elves. A terrible monster with the upper body of a drow and the lower body of a giant spider. A twisted mind. A crazy desire for blood, and a terrible desire for destruction after the distortion of hatred. The spider elves were the losers of the internal struggle of the drows. They were transformed into such monsters by the power of the Queen of Spiders. They were also one of the most troublesome and annoying monsters in the Underdark. The shadows gradually disappeared. The team of drows was still moving forward, but there was a sight in the dark watching them. The rogue has found the target. A drow matriarch, petrifying lizard knights, and spider elves have appeared. We are sure that the prey has appeared, but the specific location of the target cannot be detected at present. A cold metallic voice sounded. Keep your distance, don't get too close to the target. Report the target's location at all times. The Queen of Spiders is likely to be hiding in the team. There was a slight trace in the dark. Understood. The elemental altar. Soren looked at the last elemental altar in front of him and could not help but clench his curved sword nervously. As long as he got the fourth elemental stone, wind, then he could proceed to the final challenge. The 4 elemental elders. After combining the 4 elemental stones, the wind elemental elder, the water elemental elder, the fire elemental elder, and the earth elemental elder would be summoned. They were all legendary level creatures. Only by defeating all of them would one be able to obtain the final spoils of war. A sealed fragment of divinity. This fragment of divinity came from an ancient evil god. Although it was only a broken fragment of divinity, it could still promote someone to the realm of demigod. Divinity plus divinity equals demigod realm. Soren had enough divinity in him. As long as he had divinity, he could advance to demigod at any time. Perhaps there would not be too much of a change in strength. However, there was one thing that was very important to Soren. As long as he advanced to the realm of demigod, Soren would be able to completely ignore the legendary spell, Time Stop. This legendary spell would be completely ineffective against him. No matter what level of spellcaster he faced, he would not sit still and wait for his death. This was the biggest benefit of advancing to the realm of demigod. Moreover, as long as Soren could raise his divinity level to minor divinity, then he could transform himself into saint form. Basically, he could ignore all spells from circle 1 to 3. The saint form had high resistance against low-level spells. Many spells could not even break through the energy field of the saint form. Only when he advanced to the realm of demigod could he be considered to have stepped into the realm of gods. P.S. There is one more update today. Please recommend it. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.